Chapter 265. Leaving the lounge, Wang Chong headed straight for his study. That was where Wang Chong cultivated. Unexpectedly, by the time Wang Chong entered the study, there were already 4 figures standing inside. Before Wang Chong could say anything, Put on. One figure after another kneeled in front of Wang Chong with a momentum that could topple mountains and topple jade pillars. Elder Ma, what are you all doing? Alarmed, Wang Chong hurriedly dodged to the side. Wang Chong didn't dare to accept such a huge gesture. Wang Gongzi, words cannot express our gratitude to you. Please accept our kowtow. The 4 in the room were Ma Yinlong, Steel Arms, the Eagle, and Solitary Wolf. With reddened eyes, they abruptly bowed to Wang Chong. Seniors, you're really trying to kill me. How could Wang Chong dare to accept it? At the same time, he was also surprised. He remembered that Ma Yinlong, Steel Arms, and the Eagle had just entered the royal palace to meet the emperor. They should be celebrating by now, so why would they suddenly appear here? Gongzi, you can choose not to accept it, but we have to pay our respects. It has been 15 years, 15 years. If not for Gongzi, we might never have been able to wash away the humiliation we have suffered. With reddened eyes, Ma Yinlong and a few others kowtowed a few times before standing up. Wang Chong could sense the emotions in their hearts, and he was deeply moved. Be it Ma Yinlong, Steel Arms, or the Eagle, they were all unyielding men of the Tang dynasty. It had been 15 years since the incident back then, but even though they had concealed their identities, they still couldn't forget it. Some were for themselves, some were for the Tang dynasty, and some were for their comrades who had been wronged back then. They were truly worthy of respect. Elders, you are exaggerating. King Sojurim has been executed, and everything is in the past now. Wang Chong wishes to congratulate you all on returning to the Bureau of Military Personnel and Bureau of Punishments. Wang Chong was genuinely happy for the 4 of them. He had already received news that after meeting the emperor in the palace, the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Justice had already invited them back. Hearing Wang Chong's words, Ma Yinlong, the Eagle, Steel Arms, and Solitary Wolf glanced at one another and smiled. Speaking of which, we're also here for this matter. We've already rejected the invitation from the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Punishments. Ma Yinlong said. Ah. Wang Chong's body shook slightly, his face full of surprise. Why? The 4 of them were originally from the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Justice, but they were banished because of what happened back then. Based on Wang Chong's understanding, the 4 of them should be hoping to return to the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Justice. To think that Ma Yinlong and the others would reject him, this was out of Wang Chong's expectations. When I was just demoted to the Ministry of Personnel, I was indeed thinking about washing away my shame and returning to the Ministry of Justice. But it's been 15 years, no matter how many thoughts I have, I've already become indifferent. Indeed. Back then, we were still youngsters in our 20s, but looking at us now, we're already in our 40s. Things are still the same, but people have changed. Our colleagues from back then are no longer around. Do we still have to compete with a bunch of youngsters? What the Eagle said is what I'm thinking as well. Our wish is already fulfilled as long as we can avenge the humiliation of our colleagues from back then. Furthermore, the positions in both the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Punishments are already full. If we were to join them recklessly, and they even have to arrange special positions for us, some youngsters will be implicated. What's the point of that? I've already gotten used to it after spending so many years outside. I'm really not used to it. I'm not going back. The group waved their hands casually as they expressed their thoughts. Wang Chong looked at the 4 of them. Their expressions were a little complicated, but their eyes were exceptionally resolute. Clearly, they had been contemplating this matter for a very long time, and they couldn't be any more determined. No matter what, this is the decision of the elders, and Wang Chong will respect it. May I know what plans the elders have for the future? Wang Chong said. Hearing that they weren't going to the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Punishments, Wang Chong faintly had some thoughts. However, Wang Chong wasn't confident in this matter. Whether it would succeed or not would depend on their wishes. This is also what we wanted to say next. If young master doesn't mind, I hope to be able to follow by young master's side in the future. The one who said this was the eagle. As he spoke, he took a step forward. Me too. If not for young master, I don't know if we would be able to avenge the humiliation we suffered in this lifetime. Young master, please accept me. Lone Wolf also took a step forward and said solemnly. If young master doesn't mind that I only have one arm, please accept me as well. Iron Arms smiled as he stepped forward. Of course not. Where did these seniors come from? How could I possibly turn my back on them? I'm more than happy. Wang Chong was simply overjoyed. He was still wondering whether the four of them would be willing to follow him if they weren't going to join the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Punishments. However, Wang Chong wasn't confident in this matter, and he was still hesitating on how he should turn them down. He didn't expect the four of them to take the initiative to say that they wanted to follow him. Wang Chong had seen how powerful the four of them were. Even though Iron Arms was missing an arm, his offense was still inconceivably powerful. Not to mention, there were quite a few profound martial realm experts among them. Other than the guards in the clan, Wang Chong didn't have any experts by his side. However, the guards in the clan weren't even worth mentioning. Even Mayase Mayaka could do whatever she wanted in the clan back then, needless to say, the experts who were even stronger than her. If the four of them were to follow him, it would be like adding wings to a tiger. At this moment, Wang Chong couldn't contain his joy. Of the four, only Ma Yinlong hadn't expressed his stance yet. Gongzi, forgive me for not being able to follow you like the others for the time being. Because, there's something important that I have to do. After I'm done with that matter, if Gongzi doesn't mind, I'm willing to serve you. Ma Yinlong fell silent for a moment before replying. Deep sorrow could be heard in his voice. Just that, even I have no idea how long this matter will take. It could be a year, 10 years, or even longer. Oh. Wang Chong was surprised, but he soon chuckled. Don't worry, senior. If there's anything you need, feel free to ask. Everyone had their own secrets. Even though Wang Chong didn't know what would require so much time from Ma Yinlong, he could guess that it had to do with the matter from back then. There's no need for that. Ma Yinlong waved his hands and smiled. I'll have to trouble Gongzi to take care of these old brothers of mine. Gongzi is the descendant of Duke Jiao, and you have the world in your heart. If these old brothers of mine stay by Gongzi's side, they might be of greater use than if they stayed in the Bureau of Military Personnel and Bureau of Punishments. The other one is Solitary Wolf. That fellow loves money as much as his life, and I heard that Gongzi is earning money every day. I hope that Gongzi can take good care of him. Hearing Ma Yinlong's amusing words, Wang Chong couldn't help but burst into laughter. Elder, rest assured. Even if I have other capabilities, I'm still capable of earning money. The group of people couldn't help but laugh. Gongzi, there's no need for you to address us as elders in the future. Just call us by our nicknames, Solitary Wolf, the Eagle, and Steel Arms. Ma Yinlong soon left. Watching as the other party's silhouette disappeared through the door, Wang Chong couldn't help but sigh. Even though they hadn't worked together for long, the bite of the white tiger from the Bureau of Punishments had left a deep impression in Wang Chong's heart. Elder, rest in peace. Wang Chong thought. After making arrangements for the Eagle, Steel Arms, and Solitary Wolf, Wang Chong got back to work. Even though the matter with the Gogurians had been settled, Wang Chong still had a lot of matters to attend to. Wang Chong's harvest from the encirclement of the Gogurian stronghold was bountiful. Other than a few chests which Wang Chong kept for himself, the rest of the Goguryeo ginseng were delivered to the spirit vein by Wang Chong for the younger generation that Wang Chong had selected from the various clans. These people were the future of the Wang clan, as well as Wang Chong's future subordinates. Since Wang Chong didn't have much use for the ginseng himself, he decided to give it to the younger generation first. Following which, Wang Chong summoned Tuoba Guiyuan and had him deal with the Wuxia steel. After settling everything, Wang Chong finally had some free time. Time flew, and unknowingly, 7 to 8 days had passed. Outside the capital, in the depths of the mountains filled with lush greenery, white steam could be seen rising from the peak of the mountain. Amidst the steam, a figure was seated motionlessly on the ground. Spiritual energy was surging in from all directions, gushing into that figure's body. Ha! After an unknown period of time, Wang Chong exhaled lightly, and he slowly opened his eyes amidst the white steam. A golden ray of dawn shone from the horizon, piercing through the treetops, dyeing the entire forest golden. Gazing into the distance, one could see a long flight of stairs stretching from the bottom of the mountain all the way to the peak. On the two sides of the ladder, there were countless quaint and elegant pavilions and corridors. The further one went, the more buildings one could see. At the peak of the mountain, one could see a majestic palace complex. There were residential areas, training areas, resting areas, gardens, ponds, fake mountains. Everything was there. Not far away from Wang Chong, a group of young men and women were practicing and sparring in the training field. Loud bangs could be heard, and their punches and kicks were full of vigor. Around them, the Imperial Army instructors invited by Wang Chong held their heads high and puffed out their chests. With a stern look in their eyes, they berated and gave pointers to the younger generation selected from the various clans. It's not easy. Wang Chong took a deep breath. Looking at the lively scenery around him, he felt a strong sense of pride and accomplishment. After 4 to 5 months, after expending a large amount of manpower, resources, and money, the base that Wang Chong had planned was finally completed with the support of the spirit vein. Even though it was still hidden in the depths of the mountains, to Wang Chong, everything was on the right track. In the future, this would be the capital that he would use to change the world. In the future, I can't just limit myself to the various clans. I have to recruit more people, and I can't just limit myself to this one martial arts base. In the future, I have to build more such bases in the various prefectures. Gazing at the rising sun, Wang Chong felt boundless hope in his heart. This spirit vein was his starting point, but it wasn't his end. In the future, Wang Chong intended to expand this model to the various regions of the Central Plains and recruit more people. The commoners and orphans would be Wang Chong's priority targets. The wealthy merchants of the various regions were also on the list of recruits. In his previous life, he had always stuck to his own views, but he had never thought of making use of his background to make use of this strength. He didn't know that regardless of whether they were rich or poor, they were all the Tang people of the Central Plains before the catastrophe, so how could there be a distinction between rich and poor? It was a waste of this strength and his background. Chong-er. Chapter 266. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Wang Chong turned around, only to see a familiar figure staring at him from beneath a towering tree. Master. With a smile, Wang Chong hurried forward to greet the other party. The person beneath the tree was no other than Wang Chong's master on the spirit vein, the evil emperor. It had been a few months since they last met, and the evil emperor had grown much stronger than when Zhang Xian first met him. At the same time, his complexion seemed much better as well. However, the aura he exuded seemed to have become more and more restrained. Unlike the fearsome aura of those of the unorthodox path, his aura seemed to have become gentler and gentler. If one didn't know his background, they would have thought that the grey-robed old man before them was just an ordinary person. Master has changed a lot, a lot. Wang Chong looked at his master, who was sipping on a cup of fragrant tea, and he couldn't help but sigh. His master's transformation was obvious. It was as if he was a completely different person from when he first met him. Even though Wang Chong didn't know how it happened, he couldn't help but feel happy for his master in the depths of his heart. "How's your cultivation going?" The evil emperor put down his teacup and asked. "It's still all right. However, I'm still unable to condense my origin energy into white ripples." Wang Chong lowered his head and replied respectfully. Wang Chong had already reached origin energy tier 9, but his origin energy had to be pure. Only after reaching tier 9 pinnacle would he be able to condense white ripples around his origin energy. This formless ripple halo was the most basic form of energy. Once mastered, it would become incredibly powerful, and one's fighting prowess would rise by a notch. This was what Wang Chong had been doing every day on the spirit vein. In order to condense white ripples from origin energy tier 9 to tier 9 pinnacle, one has to compress one's origin energy to the extreme. This is also the reason why I called you here. Haste makes waste. Don't be impatient when cultivating. With your strength, you should be able to make a breakthrough in at least 3 to 5 days. The evil emperor said grimly. "Yes, I'll remember your words." Wang Chong said respectfully. No matter how infamous and terrifying the evil emperor was, he treated him so well that he was speechless. Not only did he treat him as a disciple, he treated him like family. Humans have feelings, and Wang Chong had unknowingly treated the evil emperor as his own family. "Huh, third brother, so you are here." Suddenly, a childish laughter that sounded like silver bells rang out. Before the voice faded, a skinny and small figure excitedly rushed out from inside. On his head, there were 2 extremely eye-catching goat horn braids. "Why are you running? Have you finished your homework?" The evil emperor, who had a genial look on his face a moment ago, suddenly put on a stern face and reprimanded sternly. Whoosh! As if a bucket of cold water had been poured over her, the Wang clan's little sister's excited expression came to a screeching halt. A look of fear appeared on her face, but it was quickly replaced by anger. She glared at the demonic emperor old man, clearly unconvinced. "What, are you not convinced? Humph, what's so great about it? You are already so old, yet you dare to bully a child like me. Heh, what's the point of saying all this? If I don't defeat you, don't dream of leaving this place." Old fellow, not seeing the 2 of them staring at each other as if they were enemies, Wang Chong was on the verge of bursting into laughter. Little sister was born with divine strength and outstanding talent, but her personality was fickle. She was always slacking off, and there was no one in the Wang clan who could control her. Wang Chong wanted to intervene, but it was a pity that he wasn't a match for her. But this time, his little sister had met her nemesis. Acting coquettishly, pleading, acting pitiful, throwing a tantrum, scolding, launching sneak attacks, sneaking away. In the past few months, in order to leave the mountain, his little sister had tried her best. However, all of these methods were useless before the evil emperor. "Little sister, you can't blame me for this. You were the one who came here out of curiosity." Wang Chong chuckled inwardly. "Third brother, hurry back and gather some soldiers. Call big uncle over, we'll vanquish this old man together." Seeing that she couldn't win against the other party, the Wang family's little sister immediately ran over to look for her brother with a frenzied look. "You must be joking, as if I would agree to it." Wang Chong laughed so hard that his stomach was about to burst. If his little sister knew that he had already informed his mother to allow her to cultivate here peacefully, she would probably be even more frenzied. "Little sister, big uncle is extremely busy and he won't come over. Cousin and I aren't a match for him, so it's useless even if we come. You should just listen to me and cultivate here. When you graduate, you will be able to leave this place." Wang Chong persuaded. "Ah! I'm going crazy. This old man makes me cultivate every day." The Wang family's little sister grumbled. Clearly, she didn't know that her brother was in cahoots with the old man in her eyes. "Humph, old man, just you wait. One day, I will defeat you." The Wang family's little sister pointed a finger at the evil emperor angrily. In the end, she seemed to deflate. Flinging her arms, she walked toward her brother, hoping to seek consolation. Wang Chong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Just as he was about to console her. "Ha, I've caught you." Just as she brushed past the evil emperor, a crafty glint flashed across the Wang family's little sister's black eyes. The evil emperor didn't see it, but Wang Chong, who was facing her, saw it clearly. This little sister actually knows how to play tricks. Wang Chong widened his eyes in shock. Was this still the naive little sister he knew? Or could it be that his little sister was forced to display the talent that she didn't have before? But what was even more shocking was yet to come. Pang! The Wang family's little sister suddenly leaped high into the air with a force that didn't match her size. Then, tilting her body, she threw a punch at the evil emperor. Boom! Raging winds blew and stellar energy scattered in all directions. What burst forth from the Wang family's little sister's small fist was an unbelievably terrifying force. Kacha, the tree behind the evil emperor, was snapped in half by the strong wind, and the stone slabs on the ground shattered. In Wang Chong's eyes, he could clearly see a dazzling green halo bursting forth from his little sister's small body. Wang Chong had never seen such a huge halo before. Rather than a halo, it was more like a halo. From the halo, Wang Chong could feel the power of the mountains and the earth. Under the effect of this huge green halo, his little sister's aura seemed to fuse with the mountains and forest beneath her. The surging spiritual energy in the spirit vein was attracted to her and fused with her small fist, multiplying her strength. Then, she smashed her fist toward the evil emperor. Boom! Shockwaves shot out in all directions, and the huge force caused the entire mountain range to tremble slightly. The moment the loud explosion sounded, Wang Chong could clearly hear the faint silhouette of a vast mountain appear behind his little sister. Halo! Halo, my little sister has actually broken through to the true martial realm. In that instant, Wang Chong's mind was in a mess. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Wang Chong wouldn't have believed that his little sister had already broken through her bottleneck and reached the true martial realm after just a few months of training with his master. Furthermore, the halo that she cultivated was unimaginably powerful, far surpassing any true martial realm halo that Wang Chong had seen before. No one in the true martial realm could surpass her strength. His little sister's transformation was truly a complete one, even greater than his own. Ha! Regardless of how chaotic Wang Chong's mind was, on the other side, the Wang family's child was howling delicately. Exerting her full strength, she launched a flurry of attacks toward the evil emperor. Boom boom boom. A thick white fog pervaded the area. No matter how the Wang clan's little sister attacked, no matter how much strength she used, the demonic emperor old man would always hold a single hand behind his back and simply raise a finger to block all her attacks. Left, right, up, down, front, back. No matter which direction the attacks came from, the evil emperor remained motionless. That single finger of his was like the world's strongest barrier, blocking all of the Wang family's little sister's attacks. Ah! Not again. The Wang family's little sister suddenly flew into a rage. With a somersault, she landed on the ground and puffed her cheeks even more furiously. Humph! Old fogey, one day, I will surpass you. Furious, the Wang family's little sister harumphed angrily. Without a word, she turned around and dashed into the main hall to cultivate. Master, little sister's halo, Wang Chong was bewildered. His little sister was gluttonous and lazy, just waiting for death to come. She spent 3 days fishing and 2 days drying the net, just like him. In his previous life, she had never cultivated any halos. That massive green halo that appeared out of nowhere was unheard of. This was completely out of Wang Chang's expectations. Everything was different from his previous life. You should be able to see it too. This is the halo of mountains, a true martial realm one Dan halo. It allows one to draw energy from the mountains and earth, allowing one's strength to grow tremendously. It can be considered as a type of strength halo, but it's of the highest tier. The evil emperor said. There was no need for him to hide anything from Wang Chong. From the first time he met this little lass, he could already sense her astounding talent and strength. Putting aside 1 in 10,000, it was hard to find even 1 in a million. If not for that, he wouldn't have forcefully taken her in as his disciple and made her stay here to cultivate. What's going on? Wang Chong was bewildered. True martial realm cultivators had strength halos, and strength halos. These halos could amplify a cultivator's strength, but they were definitely not this ridiculous. For his little sister's halo to be able to draw energy from the mountains, this was inconceivable. To a certain extent, it was already close to the profound martial realm halo. Although I don't understand it, I can vaguely guess. Year, month, day, hour are known as the 4 pillars, and each pillar has 2 characters, collectively known as the 8 characters. This is a divination art I dabbled in when I was young. I asked your mother. Your little sister was born in the year of Yi Wei, belonging to the Yin category. If I'm not wrong, she was probably born in the Yin year, the Yin month, the Yin day, and the Yin hour. This is the 8 characters of complete Yin, also known as the moment of extreme Yin. People born at this time are born with the opportunity of heaven and earth, making them different from others. Extreme Yin needs to be compatible with extreme Yang, so her body is extremely attractive to Yang energy. Even if she does nothing, she is born with divine strength. And once she starts cultivating, she can even attract the essence of the mountains. And given her talent, as long as she works a little harder, her future achievements will be limitless. It's even possible for her to surpass the me from back then. The evil emperor sighed as he said this. To be able to take in 2 disciples like this in his later years, he really had no regrets in his life. Wang Chong looked at his master, the evil emperor, in a daze. This was the first time he knew that there was such a reason behind his little sister's divine strength. Chapter 267. You really shouldn't waste such talent. Your Wang clan is a clan of ministers and generals. If you leave this lass with me, she might become an influential expert in your Wang clan in the future. The evil emperor said. Master, don't worry. However you want to teach her, just go ahead and do it. I will explain it to mother. Wang Chong said. Did he meet someone who could teach his little sister a lesson? Wang Chong wasn't going to be a good guy. His little sister wanted him to persuade his master, the evil emperor, but that was a completely different matter. It was already good enough that he didn't ask his master to add ingredients to her cultivation. The evil emperor nodded. Then, he looked at Wang Chong with a hint of worry in his eyes. I don't know if it's right or wrong for me to teach you the little yin-yang art. Your cultivation is too fast. I thought that since you aren't a member of a sect, your cultivation wouldn't be as fast. Who could have thought that it would be faster to cultivate in the military? This secret art might be powerful, but it has a fatal flaw. This is also the reason why I was assassinated by that traitorous disciple. Chonger, you must remember that you can't be too hasty with the little yin-yang art. If possible, you should slow down a little. Don't raise your cultivation too quickly to avoid future problems. Master, don't worry. I know what to do. Wang Chong chuckled inwardly. The reason why he was interested in the great yin-yang heaven creation art was because it could raise his cultivation at the fastest speed. As for the other hidden dangers, if he could change the fate of the Tang dynasty and avert that calamity, so what if there were any hidden dangers? Master was thinking too much. The evil emperor didn't say anything. He could see the disdain in Wang Chong's eyes clearly, and he could only sigh. He was the one who imparted the little yin-yang art to Wang Chong, so the latter was the source of everything. He could only think of a way to resolve the flaws in the little yin-yang art and great yin-yang heaven creation art. I hope that it will work. The demonic emperor old man said to himself as he glanced at the rosy sky. After living in a sect for so long, he was used to the kind of mutual deception, you attack me, you attack me. Suddenly entering the imperial court of the Tang dynasty and coming into contact with an ordinary secular family like the Wang family, the evil emperor suddenly felt his entire being relax. There was no mutual deceit, no one knew who he was, no one feared him like he was the evil emperor, no one feared him like a plague. There was only an ordinary life here. He taught a disciple with good aptitude to quietly cultivate in the depths of a spirit vein that no one knew about. He had to endure the sneak attacks of a teenage girl from time to time. At the same time, he scolded her a few times every day and ordered her to practice diligently. When he was free, he could even brew a cup of tea, eat a few pieces of braised beef sprinkled with sesame seeds, and drink a few mouthfuls of wine. His life was plain, and his heart was at peace. It was as if his entire being had relaxed. The evil emperor had truly fallen in love with this new lifestyle. As for these two disciples that he took in his later years, the evil emperor also liked them from the bottom of his heart. These two children were not scheming. Even though the little girl would sneak attack him from time to time, all she wanted was to leave the mountain. As for Wang Chong, the evil emperor could feel that there was something weighing heavily on his mind, but that was all there was to it. Towards the evil emperor, Wang Chong was definitely sincere and did not have the slightest bit of evil thoughts. This was something that the evil emperor could feel. This child had truly treated him as his master. To the evil emperor, who had lived a life of trials and tribulations, these were all precious. No matter what, the evil emperor did not want anything to happen to these two children. The evil emperor opened up his sleeves and quickly turned around to enter the main hall. Almost at the same time, Wang Chong looked around and quickly walked towards a man-made fake mountain at the edge of the mountain. How is it? Wang Chong asked. Gongzi, according to Gongzi, the construction of training ground number 2 has been completed. However, the living quarters and dining hall are still lacking. I'm afraid that it will take a few more months. Beside the fake mountain, a Wang family guard in his 30s who had been waiting for a long time reported. This person was called Su Ping. Just like Meng Long and the others, he had been a guard of the Wang family for more than a decade and was extremely reliable. Even though his martial arts couldn't be compared to Shen Hai and Meng Long, and he wasn't as agile, he was able to carry out tasks well. Everything that was assigned to him could be completed on time, meticulously and methodically. Training ground number 2 was a plan that Wang Chong had set up outside of the spirit vein base. The spirit vein that Wang Chong had found spanned from north to south and spanned a huge area. It would be a waste to use it as a training ground for the descendants of the various clans. Furthermore, there was no need for such a huge area. Thus, Wang Chong thought of the training ground number 2 plan. At the northernmost area of the spirit vein, a distance away from the base, he planned to open it to the outside world. In Wang Chong's plan, this training ground was just like the residence he had built on White Tiger Peak outside the Kunwu training ground. Both of them were extremely important. How many people can the living quarters of training ground number 2 currently hold? Wang Chong said as he gazed toward the north of the mountain range. Due to the forest, Wang Chong wasn't able to get a clear view of the surroundings. However, from afar, he could still make out a small cluster of eaves rising above the forest. Under the morning glow, it was dyed golden. That should be the training ground number 2, which was still under construction. It can hold around 30 to 40 people. Su Ping pondered for a moment before replying with a stern expression. That's sufficient. By the time I return, training ground number 2 should be ready to open. Wang Chong smiled. If he were to make good use of this training ground number 2, not only would he be able to raise his influence, it would also be a huge treasure trove. Spirit veins. Moreover, it wasn't even a large spirit vein with an astonishing amount of vitality. Such a place would probably be a huge attraction to any big clan. If he were to make good use of this thing, it would probably become his second huge, gold mountain, just like the Hyderabad ore. However, this matter still needed to be done step by step and couldn't be rushed. After telling Su Ping about the future plans, Wang Chong pondered for a moment before turning around and walking toward the training ground on the other side of the base. At the side of the training ground, an old instructor in his 50s was supervising the training of the young men and women. His sideburns were white and his face was stern, making him look very experienced. Young master. Seeing Wang Chong coming over, the old instructor quickly stopped and bowed slightly with a respectful expression. Young master. Almost at the same time, a group of young men and women who were training also noticed Wang Chong. All of them looked excited as they stopped their training and greeted Wang Chong. Their gazes were filled with fanaticism and joy as if they had seen their idol. Wang Chong greeted them with a smile. Continue your training. That simple sentence left everyone excited. Some of the young ladies even shrieked. Even though Wang Chong wasn't old, many of the things he had done weren't something that an ordinary person of his age could do. Thus, no one realized that Wang Chong wasn't much older than them. Elder Xiang, this way please. Wang Chong smiled. Under the fervent gazes of the crowd, he walked to the side with the old instructor. The old instructor's surname was Xiang, and he was recommended by Wang Chong's uncle and the other 8 instructors. Even though he wasn't the first to arrive at the base on the spirit vein, he had the highest prestige in the base, be it before or after. All of the Imperial Army instructors viewed him as their leader, and it wasn't easy to invite him over. All of the retired Imperial Army instructors respected him deeply. Before him, Wang Chong didn't dare to put on airs as the grandson of the 9th Gongzi. Instead, he addressed him as Elder Xiang. There are strict rules regarding the retirement of the Imperial Army, and it's impossible for us to agree to a request like Gongzi's. Besides, Gongzi has great ambitions. However, Duke Jiao is a person of high prestige, and he abides by his morals. This is something that everyone in the world has witnessed. On top of that, Gongzi has the heart to help the country, and you don't harbor any evil thoughts. That's why I agreed to your request. Elder Xiang said as he walked. There were many prestigious clans in the capital who wanted to invite him over, but he had never opened his mouth. The reason why he made an exception this time around was because he had a favorable impression of Wang Chong. The regional commander's incident caused Wang Chong to submit a petition to the Holy Emperor, and he was nearly sentenced to death in prison. Only someone with great courage would be able to do such a thing. Furthermore, he came from an upright faction, and everyone knew that he was on Duke Jiao's side. This was also the reason why he agreed to Elder Xiang's request. Elder Xiang, thank you for your favor. By opening this base in the spirit vein, I intend to lend the Empire a helping hand. Currently, Uzan, Turkic Khaganate, Goguryeo, Mengshi Zhao, and Abbasid Caliphate are no longer what they were in the past. However, not many people in the royal court know about it. The reason why Wang Chong is doing this is because he hopes that it will be of help to the Empire in the future. Wang Chong said. Wang Chong wouldn't say such words to other instructors. They wouldn't even ask about it. However, Elder Xiang was different. He had been an instructor in the Imperial Army for 27 years, and he had taught countless Imperial Army members. Many of the current Imperial Army instructors were his students. In the Imperial Army, his reputation, influence, standing, and rallying power were all extremely important. Furthermore, Elder Xiang had participated in several major battles of the Empire, and he was acquainted with many influential officials in the royal court. As such, he was well versed in the various aspects of the Empire. In the letter that little Uncle Wang Mi wrote to him, he emphasized that he had to treat Elder Xiang with sincerity and that he couldn't hide anything from him. If he could win Elder Xiang's favor, as long as he summoned him, Wang Chong would be able to receive immeasurable help. Elder Xiang stopped in his tracks. He stared at Wang Chong with a pair of penetrating eyes, and after a moment, he finally nodded his head. He could see sincerity in Wang Chong's eyes. This was what Wang Chong said, and that was what he was thinking. It's a good thing that you think so. Like father, like son. You come from a clan of generals and ministers, and it's a blessing for the empire to be able to see through the hidden dangers of the empire. In the capital, there are members of the royal family, nobles, and influential clans. I've seen many of them. There are those who play chicken and fight with dogs, those who laze around and wait for death, those who fight with violence, and those who strive for fame. However, to be able to care for the empire and care for the world is truly commendable. There's no one in your generation who can match up to you. As long as you can maintain this sincerity, your future achievements will be limitless. I've already written several letters to invite some of my old friends and former students. I hope that they can lend you a helping hand. Elder Xiang's lips moved unhurriedly, but the contents of his words left Wang Chong overjoyed. Thank you, Elder Xiang. Wang Chong was delighted. Elder Xiang's old friends and students numbered in the hundreds, needless to say, his students. At this moment, Wang Chong wasn't worried that there weren't enough Imperial Army instructors in the Spirit Vein base. Instead, he was worried that he wouldn't be able to accommodate them. Furthermore, if Elder Xiang were to write a letter and express his stance, the instructors of the Imperial Army would surely be able to make an immediate impact. At that time, Wang Chong would probably be able to gather a large number of men. Chapter 268. The students that you have recruited are still acceptable. However, if you intend to do something for the empire, I'm afraid that these 100 students won't be enough. Elder Xiang stopped and looked at Wang Chong. Elder Xiang, don't worry. These students are only the first batch. I will recruit more people in the future, and it won't just be limited to our Wang clan. Wang Chong said sincerely. Oh. Elder Xiang was surprised, but he was more impressed by the other party. So you already have a concrete plan in mind. That's great. I seem to have been worrying too much. After ending his conversation with Elder Xiang, Wang Chong quickly returned to the main hall. Time flew, and before he knew it, another 3 days had passed. By the side of the spirit vein, Wang Chong was seated cross-legged. His eyes were focused on his nose, and his nose was focused on his heart. His mind, spirit, and energy were circulating along his meridians and acupoints. The circulation of origin energy would absorb mental energy. Wang Chong hadn't noticed it at the start, but as he grew stronger and stronger, his origin energy would absorb more and more psychic energy, and this would become obvious. Thus, even though his origin energy was replenished, his mental energy would still be slightly fatigued. He would need to rest for a moment before he could recover. Wang Chong's mental energy was stronger than others. Even though he didn't feel fatigued immediately, he could already feel his mental energy being absorbed by his origin energy. Everything was dark, and he couldn't see anything. Wang Chong maintained his composure, not moving at all. After an unknown period of time, a ripple suddenly appeared in the darkness. Vaguely, Wang Chong sensed something in the surroundings. It's here. A thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind. Wang Chong wasn't unfamiliar with this feeling. Recently, Wang Chong had been experiencing it frequently. There seemed to be something in the darkness, but it wasn't a tree, a pavilion, a boulder, or a pond. It was something even more concrete and detailed. Something invisible to the naked eye. It was close, but it was also far away. It was separated by a thin layer of paper, but it was impossible to break through it. These are the rules. Wang Chong thought to himself. The power of heaven and earth was the rule, and the martial arts halo was the manifestation of the rule. Only by comprehending the rules of heaven and earth would one be able to possess a martial halo. Of all the true martial realm cultivators, Mayase Mayaka didn't possess a martial halo, but Li Zhuxin did. Not all true martial realm martial artists would have a martial arts halo, and not everyone could have a martial arts halo just because they had enough strength. Under normal circumstances, in a situation where the combat level was about the same, the person with a martial arts halo would always be stronger than the person without. In order to possess a martial halo, one must first comprehend the rules, and before that, one must come into contact with the rules. Origin Energy Tier 9 was the beginning of everything. Only by coming into contact with the laws and sensing the existence of the laws would one be able to comprehend them. Otherwise, it would just be empty talk. Wang Chong was currently in this state. Time slowly passed, but Wang Chong did not try to break through the barrier. Instead, he allowed the origin energy to flow freely, allowing it to absorb his psychic energy as it flowed. All living things have their own nature. When one reached Origin Energy Tier 9 Pinnacle and wanted to form a white ripple halo, the most important thing was to allow the flow of the Yuan Qi to flow naturally and allow the two to converge to the peak. If one were to forcefully do something, one would only end up with a waste of time. Some people might even go berserk because of this. 1. When the absorption of origin energy reached its peak, when it could no longer absorb any more, a qualitative change occurred. With a loud rumble, Wang Chang's mental strength seemed to have broken through some kind of bottleneck, and he seemed to have comprehended something. In the next instant, the origin energy that was restricted to his dantian and meridians suddenly burst forth with a loud rumble, breaking through the limits of his body and gushing out from his pores. Boom! The space around Wang Chong trembled. If one were to look down from the sky, one would see a clear shockwave emanating from his body. When the shockwave reached its peak, it suddenly shrank and collapsed, forming a white ripple. As soon as the white ripple was formed, it felt as though it was made of steel, and it felt as though it was invincible. Boom! Around a zhang away from Wang Chong, a craggy black fake mountain was swept by the white ripple, and with a loud rumble, it exploded into smithereens. Fine dust rose up to a height of 1 zhang and filled the air. Success! In the midst of the shockwave, Wang Chong abruptly stood up, and a brilliant glint flashed across his eyes. From Origin Energy Tier 9 to Origin Energy Tier 9 Pinnacle, the amount of origin energy he possessed didn't increase by too much, but the difference in prowess was like the difference between heaven and earth. Boom! Wang Chong abruptly punched out, and the origin energy in his body jolted. Then, a white ripple shot out from his fist, and at the very end of the origin energy, it seemed as though it was invisible. Boom! A massive wave was stirred up in the air. The might of Wang Chong's punch was as powerful as a tsunami. This is great! Wang Chong was exhilarated. The might of the barbaric god that he had cultivated after reaching Origin Energy Tier 9 Pinnacle was on full display. In terms of pure might, Wang Chong's current strength was far above that of an Origin Energy Tier 9 cultivator. One move after another. Wang Chong executed the dragon bone art that he had learned back then, and every single time he executed it, a white ripple would appear around him. In fact, even when he kicked with his feet, a white ripple would appear, increasing the might of his moves by several fold. With a light kick, Wang Chong shattered a boulder. At this moment, Wang Chong was able to summon powerful white ripples from any part of his body. Let me try out the 100 Steps Divine Fist. Wang Chong looked around, and soon, his eyes fell on a large tree to the side, 200 zhang away with its thick foliage. Boom! A burst of fist chi wrapped in white ripples burst forth, and with a deafening explosion, the lush tree, as well as 5 to 6 trees in the surroundings, was blasted into smithereens by Wang Chong's 100 Steps Divine Fist. The hurricane hit the ground, scraping away the turf and stirring up the soil below, scattering it all over the sky. Is Origin Energy Tier 9 so formidable? A rustling voice sounded behind him. Turning around, Wang Chong realized that there was a group of people standing behind him. Those 100 young men and women were standing at the edge of the training ground, and they had already noticed the commotion. That doesn't seem to be the formidable Origin Energy Tier 9 but the 100 Steps Divine Fist. Impossible. I've seen the 100 Steps Divine Fist before, and it doesn't possess such might. The group of young men and women suddenly started arguing with one another. Looking at the group of young men and women who were arguing with one another over him, Wang Chong chuckled. Before they could react, Wang Chong leaped down from the peak of the mountain and dashed into the distance. Back then, when he first entered the mountain, he estimated that it would take him 10 days to reach Origin Energy Tier 9 pinnacle and form the White Ripple Halo. Now that he had achieved his goal, it was about time for him to leave. So. In just a moment, Wang Chong disappeared from sight. Lad. Behind him, the evil emperor sipped on a mouthful of Mount Junshan snow butterfly tea as he watched Wang Chong disappear into the distance. A smile crept onto his lips. But soon, his smile turned stern. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and cultivate. Humph. An indignant voice came from the window, and then everything was peaceful again. Gongzi. Outside the Spirit Vein base, 3 carriages were parked. The Eagle, Steel Arms, and Solitary Wolf were standing outside, and 3 eagles were circling in the sky. Where's the location? Wang Chong nodded and asked. The Gogurian Ten Sun Tavern in the west of the city. As he spoke, Eagle passed an invitation card over. The invitation card was black, and on it were 2 large red words, Invitation Card. It was so bright that it seemed as though it was bleeding. As expected of a fierce dragon that doesn't cross the river. He sure is bold. Wang Chong shook his head. He took the invitation card from Eagle's hands and entered the carriage. Jaya. With a loud bellow and the sound of whips, the 3 carriages slowly moved toward the capital. There, the person whom Wang Chong had been waiting for a very long time had finally appeared. No one knew that a storm was brewing in the Tang dynasty. No one knew what this storm signified. It was only many years later that its effects were slowly revealed. In the west of the city, in the territory of the Gogurians, rows of lanterns hung on the streets, but their glow was dim. The encirclement against the Gogurian assassins and the death of King Sojurim had washed over this area like a storm. It had washed away the arrogance and conceit of the Gogurians, leaving them with a tinge of respect, fear, and apprehension. At this moment, Wang Chong was walking in the territory of the Gogurians. The once bustling territory of the Gogurians was now much more deserted, no longer as bustling as before. The Gogurians had attempted to assassinate the officials of the royal court, and they had even recruited 1,000 legitimate soldiers from Gogurian. If this matter were to be exposed, the Gogurians' business would be greatly affected. Most of the Gogurian shops were deserted. At the very least, this situation wouldn't change in the near future. Gongzi, I don't think this is a good idea. We have just annihilated the legitimate army of the Gogurians, and now that we are in their territory, they probably want us dead. Steel Arms said with a frown. To think that the influential Southern Protector General Zhangqiu Jianxiong would be invited to the capital in the territory of the Gogurians. After the incident with King Sojurim, everyone in the territory of the Gogurians knew about them. Privately, he had heard that the portraits of the few of them were in the possession of every Gogurian. So what about it? It's not that we are afraid of the Gogurians, but the Gogurians should be afraid of us. In the territory of the Tang dynasty, do we have to fear a few foreigners? Wang Chong puffed out his chest and said nonchalantly. He had already sensed the gazes peeking at him from the cracks of the doors, railings, and windows. But Wang Chong didn't mind it. The Gogurians should have taught them a lesson long ago. This was how the Gogurians should behave. As they chatted, the 4 soon arrived at a slightly bizarre yet lavish establishment that was black and gold in color. Ten Sun Tavern. Wang Chong glanced at the words on the black signboard opposite him. On the signboard was an image of 10 suns. Chapter 269. Zhangqiu Jianxiong had entered the capital in a low-profile manner. It was only when Wang Chong received the news that the influential Anong Protector General had stealthily entered the capital. It was clear that Zhangqiu Jianxiong was determined to succeed in this trip to the capital. "Let's enter." Wang Chong beckoned before stepping into the Ten Sun Tavern. The crimson Persian carpet was embroidered with images of blazing lava, and the two sides of the carpet were adorned with golden carvings. It wasn't gold, but real gold. In this Gogurian tavern, one could see inlaid gems, agates, and luxurious wooden furniture made from ancient wood that was at least 1,000 years old. Black crystals could be seen all around the tavern. This Gogurian Ten Sun Tavern was truly extravagant. But of course, the cost of living was also ridiculously high. Even the vast crane pavilion that the Yao clan privately operated paled in comparison to this tavern, not even worth a mention. Unless one was a wealthy merchant or tycoon, it was impossible for them to afford such a price. However, Zhangqiu Jianxiong didn't lack money. Not only did the Anong Protector General receive a generous stipend, more importantly, Wang Chong knew that the other party wasn't one to restrain himself. Over the years of guarding Annan, Zhangqiu Jianxiong had earned quite a sum of money from the 6 zhao of Irai. However, Wang Chong didn't mind it at all. Zhangqiu Jianxiong's hands were extremely clean. Even though he was vicious to outsiders, he had never extended his hands to internal affairs. He would only take what he should and not take what he shouldn't. Even so, the royal court and the commoners turned a blind eye to the Anong Protector General's actions. In the Ten Sun Tavern, a figure was already waiting at the entrance of the staircase. He was dressed in a grayish-black casual robe with wide sleeves and a golden-red belt tied around his waist. He exuded a dignified aura. "Chonger, you're here." Upon seeing Wang Chong, Wang Chong's big uncle's eyebrows relaxed and he beckoned him over. "Big uncle." With a faint smile, Wang Chong hurried forward to meet him. After not seeing him for a period of time, his eldest uncle's complexion was rosy, and he looked even more spirited and dignified than before. After surviving several crises for the family, Wang Chong knew that his uncle was now riding the crest of success in the imperial court. Although his rank had not risen, his authority and status had increased significantly. That golden red belt was a gift from the Holy Emperor. Consort Taizhen incident and the regional commander's incident had raised the prestige of the Wang clan significantly. Wang Chong was not a member of the imperial court, so it was impossible for him to benefit from it. Therefore, the biggest beneficiary of this matter was Wang Chong's uncle. The Wang clan was of the same root, and they were bound together for good or ill. Although he wasn't the one who benefited, Wang Chong was still genuinely happy. Now that grandfather has retired, Big Uncle has become the Wang clan's protective umbrella in the royal court. Wang Chong couldn't participate in the court's politics, so he could only help his uncle in this way. "You must have waited for a long time." Wang Chong walked over with a friendly look on his face. "Hee, it's all right. I've only been here for a while." Upon seeing Wang Chong walk over, Wang Zhen's stern gaze softened significantly. With a smile, he looked at Wang Chong with the concern and doting of an elder looking at a junior. This kind of closeness was unimaginable to him in his previous life. This was what Wang Chong was most proud of, and what he was most proud of. Wang Chong very much enjoyed this sort of harmonious relationship between a junior and a senior that was devoid of scheming. "You should have received Zhangqiu Jianxiong's invitation, right?" Wang Zhen looked at Wang Chong and said with his hands behind his back. I'm surprised. To think that the Southern Protector General would invite me over." There was no need for Wang Chong to hide anything from his big uncle. Wang Chong was indeed surprised to receive Zhangqiu Jianxiong's invitation. Zhangqiu Jianxiong was the revered Southern Protector General, an existence on the same level as Fomen Linta, Gao Xianji, Geshu Han, and Wang Shogui. He was a colossal crocodile in the empire's military. On the other hand, Wang Chong was a nameless nobody. He didn't even hold a single official position. Even a squad leader in the military had a higher rank than him. The difference in their statuses was like the distance between heaven and earth. One was in the sky while the other was on the ground. That was why Wang Chong found it strange. There's no need for you to belittle me. Zhangqiu Jianxiong's trip to the capital this time around has contributed greatly. Besides, as a descendant of the Wang clan, who would dare to look down on you? Wang Zhen harumphed coldly. There was an intimidating aura in his eyes. Wang Chong was currently the Qilin son of the Wang clan, the most outstanding, promising disciple of the Wang clan's younger generation. Anyone who dared to look down on Wang Chong would be looking down on the entire Wang clan. Hee. Wang Chong chuckled as he felt warmth in his heart. Even though Big Uncle didn't say it directly, Wang Chong could still sense the protective tone in his words. Right, Big Uncle, is Little Uncle not here? Wang Chong asked. Since Zhangqiu Jianxiong was intending to rope in the Wang clan, there was no reason for him to let Little Uncle off. After all, even though Little Uncle wasn't in the capital, he wasn't too far away from here. I told him not to come. Wang Zhen replied. Ah. Wang Chong looked at his big uncle in surprise. It's not appropriate for our Wang clan to get involved too deeply. The two of us are more than enough. There's no need for Little Uncle to enter, Wang Zhen said seriously. Wang Zhen sternly said as he stared deeply at Wang Chong. Big Uncle, please enlighten me. Understanding, Wang Chong put away his smile and sternly bowed to ask for guidance. Clearly, his big uncle wasn't waiting for him just to catch up with his nephew but to teach him. Even though Wang Chong had 2 lifetimes of experience under his belt, he would never underestimate his big uncle, nor would he think too highly of himself. His big uncle had spent his entire life dealing with politics, and in this aspect, he was far more experienced than Wang Chong. Zhangqiu Jianxiong is a man of great ambition and resolution. We can't afford to offend such a person, but there's no way he will side with us just because we helped him. A person like him will never side with any faction. He is a faction on his own, Wang Chong's big uncle said. Wang Chong's big uncle said. An invisible ripple shrouded the surroundings, shrouding the conversation between Wang Chong and Wang. General Wang Chong was taken aback. He knew the course of history, so he knew that Zhangqiu Jianxiong was indeed a man of great ambition. His desire for power was boundless, and it was impossible for him to side with any faction. But Big Uncle, Wang Chong recalled that not too long ago, his big uncle had sought him out for guidance due to his lack of understanding of Zhangqiu Jianxiong. But now, with his decades of experience in the royal court and politics, he was actually able to accurately grasp Zhangqiu Jianxiong's personality. Through this, he was able to deduce how to treat Zhangqiu Jianxiong and dissuade his little uncle from doing so. In that life, Wang Chong only remembered his big uncle's harsh, inflexible, strict, and unreasonable attitude toward him. He also remembered that his big uncle's misjudgment had caused the Wang clan to fall into an abyss of despair. But this time, Wang Chong had a deep impression of his big uncle. I understand. Wang Chong said. During the banquet later, you mustn't offend Zhangqiu Jianxiong, but you mustn't get too close to him either. Zhangqiu Jianxiong is different from Yang Zhao. Yang Zhao might not understand this, but Zhangqiu Jianxiong does. So, you must treat him differently. Wang Zhen said solemnly. He had high hopes for this nephew of his, and he didn't wish for anything to happen to him before he stepped into the political arena. This was especially so for a protector general like Zhangqiu Jianxiong. Big Uncle has met Zhangqiu Jianxiong? Wang Chong suddenly asked, not answering the question. Wang Zhen was surprised, but he quickly nodded. I saw him from afar in the tavern when he entered the city. Wang Chong nodded. There were some things that didn't need to be explained too clearly. At this point, Wang Zhen already understood the situation. Zhangqiu Jianxiong was still waiting inside, so it wasn't wise for the two of them to stay outside for too long. Understanding his big uncle's intentions, Wang Chong knew what he had to do. After chatting for a moment, the two of them walked up the stairs. Even though the streets of the Gogurians were cold and deserted, the Ten Sun Tavern was bustling with activity. The first thing Wang Chong saw was a group of black-armored generals on the second floor, drinking and playing rock-paper-scissors merrily. They should be the generals that Zhangqiu Jianxiong brought over from Annan. Wang Chong thought. These generals were slightly different from those in the north, and they carried the unique traits of the people from Jiannan. Since Zhangqiu Jianxiong had decided to enter the capital, it was impossible for him to be alone. At the very least, he could trust some trustworthy generals. Other than the generals that Zhangqiu Jianxiong had brought over from Jiannan, there were also many Gogurian men and women on the second floor. Upon seeing Wang Chong's group, they immediately turned to look at them hatefully. Humph! Wang Chong harumphed coldly before heading up to the third floor together with big uncle Wang Zhen. Ha ha ha, Jixin, you're here. Before he could reach the third floor, a loud laugh rang out, and he was one step ahead of him, taking the initiative to climb up the stairs. Even before Wang Chong could see the person, he had already heard the other party's voice. That person should be Zhangqiu Jianxiong. Wang Chong thought. Unlike the second floor, even though the atmosphere on the third floor was lively, it was much quieter. Upon seeing big uncle Wang Zhen, a muscular man with a powerful aura stood up from the floor. Wang Chong had never met Zhangqiu Jianxiong before, but upon reaching the third floor, Wang Chong could immediately tell who the real Zhangqiu Jianxiong was. On the left side of the hall on the third floor, close to a three-legged gold crow sculpture on the wall, a strong bearded man with extremely broad shoulders, a dragon waist and a tiger back stood up from the ground. It was just a simple movement, but it was as if a mountain had risen from the ground, emitting an aura that seemed capable of shattering the heavens and rending the earth. In his previous life, Wang Chong wasn't qualified to meet these influential protector generals of the Tang dynasty. This was the first time he was meeting Zhangqiu Jianxiong. Zhangqiu Jianxiong's aura was powerful, far surpassing that of anyone Wang Chong had met so far. More importantly, his aura was as firm as a mountain, carrying with it the unique traits of a soldier. Anyone who saw him would know at first glance that he was definitely not a general, but a commander. But what attracted Wang Chong the most was his eyes. They were a pair of eyes brimming with ambition, and he didn't bother concealing it at all. Zhangqiu Jianxiong. Chapter 270. Minister of War. The position that Zhangqiu Jianxiong was intending to take on was an extremely important one. No matter which faction it was impossible to bypass the orders of the Minister of War. Unlike the previous Minister of War, Zhangqiu Jianxiong was currently at the prime of his life, brimming with ambition. If he were to become the Minister of War, he would never allow himself to be a puppet that others could manipulate. This was also the reason why Zhangqiu Jianxiong's decision in the royal court had dragged on for so long. Even Wang Chong's big uncle, Wang Zhen, had only agreed to it after hearing that Zhangqiu Jianxiong's appointment was inevitable. Zhangqiu Jianxiong was a true outsider. His appearance would throw the entire royal court into chaos, forcefully throwing an uncontrollable variable into the mix. This was precisely what the bigwigs of the royal court feared. It was no small matter for the Southern Protector General to become the Minister of War. These thoughts flashed across Wang Chong's mind, but he soon regained his composure and stood quietly beside big uncle Wang Zhen. Brother Zhangqiu, I have kept you waiting. Please. At the same time, Wang Chong's big uncle, Wang Zhen, also extended his hand to welcome Zhangqiu Jianxiong. In the entire Wang clan, there was only one person who could stand on the same level as the Southern Protector General, Wang General. The only difference was that Zhangqiu Jianxiong was a military official while Wang Zhen was a civil official. Even though they were in different fields, Wang Zhen's experience in the royal court was in no way inferior to Zhangqiu Jianxiong. In fact, due to the fact that the Wang clan was a clan of ministers and generals, they were able to participate in the political discussions of the royal court and decide Zhangqiu Jianxiong's promotion. This was also the reason why Zhangqiu Jianxiong had always wanted to enter the royal court. You must be the famous Qilin son of the Wang clan, Wang Chong. After exchanging pleasantries with Wang Zhen, Zhangqiu Jianxiong didn't take a seat. Instead, he turned to look at Wang Chong, who had retracted his aura. Lord, you flatter me. I am indeed Wang Chong. Regarding the matter of the regional commanders, I still have to thank my lord for your help. Since Zhangqiu Jianxiong had taken the initiative to pay attention to him, Wang Chong didn't bother hiding anymore. He stepped out from his big uncle's side and bowed respectfully. There's no need to thank me. Zhangqiu Jianxiong waved his hands casually. I'm helping you out of righteousness and national affairs, so you don't have to think too much about it. On the other hand, young Master Wang has such foresight and magnanimity at such a young age. It is truly commendable that he is able to worry about the affairs of the country. Your future achievements will definitely be limitless. He had noticed Wang Chong the moment he stepped onto the stairs. Perhaps Wang Chong himself thought that as long as he kept a low profile, he would not attract attention, but this was basically impossible. One of the reasons why he invited the Wang clan to the Ten Sun Tavern was to meet the influential figure of the Wang clan, Wang Genja. The other reason was to meet the Qilin son of the Wang clan who had caused a huge uproar in the Gogurian Ten Sun Tavern. When it's time to restrain oneself, when it's time to stand out, when it's time to stand out, when it's time to speak, when it's time to speak, when it's time to act, when it's time to speak, when it's time to act, 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 when it was said that with Wang Jiuling's death, the Wang clan would surely decline. But from the looks of it, that might not be the case. I'm afraid that the fortune of the Wang clan will continue for another generation. Countless thoughts flashed through Zhangqiu Jianxiong's mind, and in the blink of an eye, he had an accurate assessment of the Wang clan. Duke Jiu was already old, and Wang Zhen had reached the end of his career in the royal court. The future of the Wang clan still rested on the younger generation of the third generation. And of all the descendants of the Wang clan, Wang Chong was Zhangqiu Jianxiong. To be able to enter the royal palace to meet the emperor at such a young age and survive even after being sent to the imperial prison, Wang Chong's grace was truly astounding. Be it Wang Zhen back then or the young Zhangqiu Jianxiong, neither of them had ever received such grace. If nothing unexpected happened, this person would surely become an influential figure in the royal court in the future. With a rough gauge of the Wang clan's pulse, Zhangqiu Jianxiong knew what he should do in the capital. At this moment, a burst of laughter suddenly sounded, drawing everyone's attention. Wang Chong turned around and saw a figure pushing open the door of another suite on the third floor and walking out, at the perfect moment. This person was dressed in a white robe and a black scarf. His demeanor was reminiscent of a scholarly official. Yang Zhao. Wang Chong's eyes blinked as he recognized that figure, and he immediately understood what was going on. Yang Zhao had clearly arrived long ago, but he chose to stay in a suite by the side. It was only after Wang Chong and his big uncle appeared and met with Zhangqiu Jianxiong that he made use of this opportunity to butt in. Clearly, this was the result of Zhangqiu Jianxiong and Yang Zhao's arrangement. Lord Zhangqiu, how is it? Am I right? Yang Zhao laughed heartily. He, not bad, not bad. Wang Gongzi is a young hero, a dragon among men. How can your background be lacking? Zhangqiu Jianxiong said with a smile. The way Zhangqiu Jianxiong spoke to Yang Zhao was much more amicable and amiable, as though they were brothers. With a single glance, one could tell that his relationship with Yang Zhao wasn't ordinary. Ha ha ha, we're all family. Come, Lord Wang, this way please. Yang Zhao laughed heartily as he walked over with his head held high. Raising his right hand, he invited Wang Zhen to take a seat on behalf of Zhangqiu Jianxiong. On the other hand, Zhangqiu Jianxiong simply smiled, not minding the gesture at all. What's going on? Wang Zhen saw all of this, and his eyebrows shot up in astonishment. He knew of the relationship between Yang Zhao and Zhangqiu Jianxiong, but from the looks of it, the relationship between the two seemed to be even more intimate than what he had imagined. On the other hand, Wang Chong was well aware of the matter, so he wasn't surprised at all. Zhangqiu Jianxiong was the financial backer behind Yang Zhao. Back then, before consort Taizhen ascended to the throne, everything had yet to be decided. Back then, Zhangqiu Jianxiong supported Yang Zhao in Annan, giving him a huge sum of money and sending him to the capital. One must know that back then, Yang Zhao was just a lowly scoundrel who was addicted to gambling. In name, he was only consort Taizhen's cousin. However, there was no guarantee that he would succeed. Under such circumstances, Zhangqiu Jianxiong still dared to invest a huge sum in Yang Zhao and treat him with respect. From this, it could be seen how daring he was. However, Zhangqiu Jianxiong probably didn't expect that Yang Zhao would lose all the money he had given him the moment he arrived in the capital, and eventually, he met Wang General now that consort Taizhen had ascended to the throne, and Yang Zhao had returned the favor. It went without saying that the two of them were on good terms. Wang Chong wasn't too surprised to learn of this relationship. On the other hand, Yang Zhao was winking at him as a signal, causing Wang Chong to chuckle inside. Please. On the other hand, Wang Zhen didn't think too much into it. He stretched out his right hand and gestured for the host and guest to take their seats. The Gogurians' chairs were exquisite, and for the sake of earning money, they were extravagant. As soon as Wang Chong sat down, he began surveying the surroundings. Zhangqiu Jianxiong didn't just invite the Wang clan's uncle and nephew to this banquet. There were quite a few other guests on the third floor as well. Most of them were Zhangqiu Jianxiong's subordinates, and the rest were probably his own men in the capital. Having been the Southern Protector General for so many years, it was impossible for Zhangqiu Jianxiong to not have any spies in the royal court. I wonder which of these people is Xianyu Zhongtong. Which one is Zhang Wentuo? Wang Chong thought. The men that Zhangqiu Jianxiong brought this time were all tall and well-built, and they exuded a powerful killing intent. With a single look, it was clear that they were important generals in the military. Of these people, there were only two that Wang Chong was concerned about. One was Xianyu Zhongtong, and the other was Zhang Wentuo. To Wang Chong, these two people held extraordinary significance. Just that, even though Wang Chong knew their names, he had never met either of them before. Logically speaking, Zhangqiu Jianxiong should have brought his closest kin with him. But even Wang Chong wasn't confident that he would be able to do so. Logically speaking, he should have been able to tell from the seating arrangement. However, the one on Zhangqiu Jianxiong's left was Yang Zhao, and on his right was a sharp-looking man with a mustache. He seemed more like a military advisor than a soldier. Thus, Wang Chong was unable to determine which one was Xianyu Zhongtong and which one was Zhang Wentuo. Or perhaps, they weren't here at all. Innkeeper, serve the dishes. Zhangqiu Jianxiong sat down, and with a wave of his hand, he beckoned for the innkeeper to serve the dishes. The Southern Protector General had the air of a military officer around him, and his every action was straightforward and magnanimous. On the other side, even though the Gogurians were feeling a little awkward, upon receiving the signal, they quickly got busy. A few exquisite appetizers were immediately served. A plate of jade capital crispy fish, a plate of shishi tongue in sauce, a plate of grade 5 dragon phoenix exuberance, and a plate of jadeite consort chicken. At the center of the banquet was a crispy roasted suckling pig, and the atmosphere of the banquet was immediately livened up. Even though he didn't have a good impression of the Gogurians, Wang Chong had to admit that they had put in a lot of effort into this tavern. The appearance, aroma, and taste of these dishes were perfect, and it was clear that they would be able to whet one's appetite with a single look. They were far superior to the dishes of the vast crane pavilion. I heard that the Gogurians worship the three-legged golden crow, and it's a symbol of extreme yang. Thus, they built this 10-sun tavern. Since Zhangzhou Jianxiong has entered the capital today, I borrowed these 10 days to host this banquet for everyone. I hope that everyone will enjoy themselves to the fullest today. Zhangzhou Jianxiong said. General, you're being too polite. The crowd hurriedly replied. In the entire tavern, the only one who could stand on equal footing with Zhangzhou Jianxiong was Big Uncle Wang. General, how could anyone else dare to accept his words? There's no need to stand on ceremony. Jiexin, I've been looking forward to meeting you for a long time back in the capital, and I've always wanted to have a chat with you. However, it's a pity that I've never had the chance to do so. Now, I'm finally able to fulfill my wish. Brother Zhangzhou, you're being too polite. Brother Zhangzhou, you'll have plenty of opportunities to do so in the future. Wang Zhen replied respectfully, a rare sight to behold. Such was the way of the bureaucracy. Zhangzhou Jianxiong was a general in the past, but once he became the Minister of War, he would no longer be the same. The two of them would have many opportunities to interact in the future. I'll be counting on your auspicious words then. Hearing those words, Zhangzhou Jianxiong's eyes lit up, and his mood lifted. Come, let's toast to your auspicious words. Chapter 271. After drinking a cup of wine, the relationship between the two sides immediately became much more harmonious. This was the first time Wang Chong was meeting Zhangzhou Jianxiong, but Big Uncle Wang Zhen was different. Although the two of them rarely interacted with each other, they were of the same generation and had long heard of each other's stories. In fact, Zhangzhou Jianxiong even knew that Wang Zhen's character was Jia Xian. On the other hand, Wang Zhen didn't address the other party as Great General or Protector General, but as Brother Zhangzhou. Both of them were of the same generation. Brother Jiexin. Zhangzhou Jianxiong put down his cup and said sincerely, in front of Brother Jiexin, there is no need for me to hide anything. After living by the borders for several decades, Zhangzhou also wished to move to another place. There are many prestigious clans in the capital, and Brother Jiexin is an influential official in the royal court. Zhangzhou hopes that he can sit in the selection for the Minister of War, and he hopes that Brother Wang can give him some pointers. Zhangzhou will be eternally grateful. Those words immediately silenced the entire third floor. All eyes turned to Wang Chong's big uncle. Soldiers tended to get straight to the point. Even though Zhangzhou Jianxiong was ambitious, he was no exception. One of the goals of this banquet was to befriend Wang Zhen and establish a connection with the Wang clan. However, what Zhangzhou Jianxiong was most concerned about was the matter regarding the Minister of War. Brother Zhangzhou is exaggerating. Wang Zhen stroked his beard with a contemplative expression. He wasn't surprised by Zhangzhou Jianxiong's question at all. Wang Zhen had already expected Zhangzhou Jianxiong to ask such a question. Brother Zhangzhou has made great contributions to the Tang dynasty by stabilizing Jiannan. With such qualifications, you are more than qualified to enter the Bureau of Military Personnel. Based on my experience, Brother Zhangzhou only has a 40% chance of entering the Central Court. 40%. Zhangzhou Jianxiong's eyes flickered with disappointment. Even with a 40% chance, it was still not enough to enter the Middle Garden. This wasn't what Zhangzhou Jianxiong wanted to hear, but he also knew that Wang Zhen was an influential official of the royal court. There was no way he would lie to him on such matters. This was also the reason why he treated Wang Zhen with such respect. Only 40%. Could Brother Jiexin please advise me on what to do in the future? Zhangzhou will definitely repay you in the future. Zhangqiu Jianxiong said earnestly. This Zhangqiu Jianxiong's thoughts are more urgent than I thought. Wang Chong looked on coldly and thought to himself. An existence of Zhangqiu Jianxiong's level was a man of his word. Since he had made such a promise, he would definitely fulfill it in the future. Such words could have been spoken in private, but Zhang Xian could see how anxious Zhangqiu Jianxiong was. Perhaps he had waited for too long, or perhaps he knew that this was his last chance. Wang Chong could sense that Zhangqiu Jianxiong was already willing to go all out for the position of Minister of War. To think that I was still thinking that there might be a slim chance of keeping Zhangqiu Jianxiong in Jiannan, but it seems like it's impossible now. Wang Chong thought to himself. Zhangqiu Jianxiong was the guardian of the southeast of the empire, and a large part of what happened in the future was due to the iron-willed Protector General Zhangqiu Jianxiong leaving Jiannan to take over the central court. Without a powerful figure like Zhangqiu Jianxiong to suppress him, Jiannan would be left empty, and powerful foes like Meng Shizhao and Uzun would have to deal with. Zhangqiu Jianxiong's transfer to the central court was a blessing for him, but the departure of Uzun and Meng Shizhao gave them an opportunity to strike. Zhangqiu Jianxiong was a powerful commander in the military, but his ambition for power was his greatest weakness. Even so, there was nothing Wang Chong could do about it. People strive for higher places, and water flows to lower places. This is human nature. Zhangqiu Jianxiong had already made up his mind to leave Jiannan, and there was nothing Wang Chong could do about it. Wang Chong could only sigh. Brother Zhangqiu, it's best for you to keep a low profile this time around, Wang Zhen said as he stroked his beard. Wang Zhen stroked his beard. His face remained impassive, but his eyes shone with the wisdom of politics. Brother Zhangqiu, do you know where the greatest obstacle to your advancement comes from? King Qi. The Yao clan. Zhangqiu Jianxiong probed. He had already communicated with the two clans, and regardless of whether it was the Yao clan or King Qi, they had expressed their support for his ascension to the central court. If Wang Zhen were to say that it was King Qi and the Yao clan, he would never have believed it. But that was precisely where the problem lay. There was no one who objected to his ascension to the capital, but the matter had yet to be settled. That's not it. How could it be them? Wang Zhen chuckled as he picked up the wine cup on the table and took a sip. It's Foman Linta, Gao Xianji, Geshu Han, and the other generals in the army, including the Annong Protector General, Zhang Shogui. Upon hearing this answer, Zhangqiu Jianxiong and his subordinates from Jiannan were taken aback. Even Wang Chong was taken aback. He had only heard of the happenings in the royal court, but he didn't pay much attention to it. The matter regarding Zhangqiu Jianxiong had indeed dragged on for quite some time. In Wang Chang's opinion, it was likely that the various powers in the royal court were unwilling to allow an outsider like Zhangqiu Jianxiong to enter the capital. But Big Uncle Wang Zhen's words provided another explanation. Although Wang Chong was surprised at first, he quickly understood what was going on after some thought. Brother Zhangqiu, think about it. They are all protector generals and great generals of the Tang dynasty, but in terms of aptitude, Foman Linta, Gao Xianji, Geshu Han, and Zhang Shogui have all contributed greatly to the Tang dynasty. If Brother Zhangqiu can ascend to the central court, doesn't that mean that Foman Linta and the others can do the same? Wang Zhen stroked his beard. The affairs of the royal court weren't as black and white as they could be. Zhangqiu Jianxiong was a formidable commander, but it wasn't that Wang Zhen was underestimating him. Zhangqiu Jianxiong had never come into contact with the royal court before. He was truly an amateur when it came to such matters. The opposition to Zhangqiu Jianxiong's entry into the capital didn't just come from the prestigious clans and nobles in the capital, but from the military as well. How dare they? Zhangqiu Jianxiong's complexion immediately turned awful. He was only trying his luck in the first place, and he didn't really expect to get anything out of it. But now that he heard about the connections in the royal court, his face darkened. If it was just the opposition from the capital, he could just walk around with his status as the Southern Protector General, and everyone would have to give him some face. Zhangqiu Jianxiong was confident that he could persuade them. The advantage of not coming into contact with the royal court for a long time was that he had never offended anyone in the royal court. But if the opposition came from the military, from the likes of the Western Protector General, Qixi Protector General, and Big Dipper Army Commander Geshu Han, then it would be impossible for him to ascend to the central court. In terms of experience and contributions, these people didn't pale in comparison to him at all. Before Wang Zhen, Yao Guangyi, and the others, he could still talk about his contributions, but before the likes of Foman Linta, there was really nothing he could say. Furthermore, due to the long period of peace in Jiannan, in some aspects, Zhangqiu Jianxiong was even inferior to them. Lord Wang, is there really no other way? Yang Zhao asked anxiously. This time, even he couldn't sit still anymore. Even though these were just Wang Zhen's words, Yang Zhao could immediately tell that there was a high chance that it was the truth of the matter. He had been in the capital for quite some time now, and he had befriended quite a number of officials. Initially, he thought that he was quite familiar with the royal court and the capital of the Tang dynasty. But at this moment, he realized that he still knew nothing about the royal court. Foman Linta and Gao Xinji have been in the Tang dynasty for many years, and they have connections in the royal court. However, if it's just these few, there's no need for Brother Zhangqiu to worry too much. After all, these few have fatal flaws, and it's impossible for them to compete with Brother Zhangqiu. In the several centuries of history of the Tang dynasty, there has never been a Hu minister of war. Not just the Tang dynasty, there hasn't been one in all of the previous dynasties. The one Brother Zhangqiu should worry about is still the Eastern Protector General, Zhang Shogui. Wang Zhen said. Wang. Before the others could react, Zhangqiu Jianxiong and the middle-aged strategist beside him were taken aback, and their faces warped in astonishment. Just like Brother Zhangqiu, Zhang Shogui is a Han, and he's a Protector General of the Empire. On top of that, he leads an army to suppress the Goguryeo Empire, Khitans, Shi, and the Eastern Turkic Khaganate. His methods are similar to Brother Zhangqiu's, perhaps even more domineering. If Brother Zhangqiu wishes to enter the royal court, he is the one you need to worry about. Wang Zhen said slowly. Wang Chong stood on the side, a pensive look on his face. This was the first time he had come into contact with such a major matter, and it involved almost all of the powers in the capital. It could be said that Zhangqiu Jianxiong had experienced the most complicated side of the royal court through this promotion. Politics had always been his weakness, and Wang Chong knew that he wouldn't be able to interfere in this matter. Thus, he chose to watch silently from the sidelines, treating this as his best political lesson. Brother Shogui, your ambitions don't lie here, right? Zhangqiu Jianxiong asked with a grim expression. The name of the Eastern Protector General, Zhang Shogui, was like the shadow of a mountain cast upon him. In the military, the two of them were the titans of the world, one in the east while the other in the south, and they rarely interacted with one another. But Zhangqiu Jianxiong knew that Zhang Shogui's qualifications were far greater than his. Most of Zhangqiu Jianxiong's contributions were in Annam. But Zhang Shogui was different. From the Uzan to the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate, to Goguryeo and Khitans, he had displayed exceptional aptitude from a young age. And unlike him, Zhang Shogui had once had a chance to become the prime minister of the Tang dynasty. Even though the other party wasn't much older than him, he was far more experienced than the Southern Protector General. Even veterans like Foman Linta and Gao Xinji were wary of him. If Zhang Shogui were to vie for the position of Minister of War, he would be a formidable foe. The only thing that made Zhangqiu Jianxiong feel at ease was that Zhang Shogui's ambition was to become the prime minister. In this aspect, Zhang Shogui's goal was much higher than his. It's true that Zhang Shogui's ambition is to become the prime minister. But Brother Zhangqiu, have you ever thought about what will happen to them if you become the Minister of War? In an instant, the entire pavilion fell silent. The eyebrows of the strategist beside Zhangqiu Jianxiong slowly creased. He understood the meaning behind Wang Zhen's words. The reason why Zhangqiu Jianxiong's ascension to the throne was not just because of the royal court, but also because of the borders. If Zhangqiu Jianxiong were to settle down in a corner, it would still be fine. But if he were to become the Minister of War, it would mean that Zhang Shougue, Gao Xianji, Fomen Linta, Geshu Han, and the others would be under his control. Thus, even if their ambitions weren't to become the Minister of War, they would never allow Zhangqiu Jianxiong to become the new Minister of War. In terms of interests, these people were aligned. Chapter 272. Xianyu Zhongtong. The matters in the royal court were already more than enough to deal with. If he were to face opposition from the military as well, his promotion to the Minister of War would be in vain. May I know if Brother Jiexin has any plans in mind? Zhangqiu Jianxiong asked. Even though this isn't an easy matter, it isn't entirely hopeless. 10% is with King Qi, 10% is with the Prime Minister, and 40% is with His Majesty. If Brother Zhangqiu can convince His Majesty, this matter will be in the bag. However, before that, it would be best for Brother Zhangqiu not to agitate Fomen Linta, Gao Xianji, and Zhang Shougue. Otherwise, this matter might blow up again. As long as the matter is settled, Brother Zhangqiu will be able to rest easy. Wang Zhen smiled. This was as much as he could offer Zhangqiu Jianxiong. The rest would be up to him. After all, he was the one who was going to be promoted. If even he wasn't determined, no one else would be able to help him. I understand. Thank you for your guidance, Brother Jiexin. Zhangqiu Jianxiong's eyes lit up, and his furrowed brows smoothed out. He was worried about everything, except the 40% that the Holy Emperor would have. 40% from the Saint King and 40% from his own experience meant that there was an 80% chance of success. There was a good 50% chance that he would succeed. With such thoughts in mind, Zhangqiu Jianxiong shot a glance at Yang Zhao, and the two of them exchanged glances. The heart of a monarch was hard to fathom, and persuading the Holy Emperor would be the most difficult. However, it was actually the easiest for Zhangqiu Jianxiong. The current Holy Emperor was truly doting on Consort Taizhen. In fact, for the sake of Consort Taizhen, he nearly made an enemy out of the entire royal court. As long as Consort Taizhen made a move, the 40% that the Holy Emperor would get wouldn't be a problem at all. Brother Zhangqiu wishes to enter the capital. How are the arrangements in Annan coming along? With the promotion of a Protector General, the borders will be empty, and the handover is no small matter. Brother Zhangqiu can go all out on the front lines, but we mustn't allow anything to go wrong in the rear. Wang Zhen said. The transfer of power at the border was often overlooked, but it was a very important matter. If anything were to happen, Zhangqiu Jianxiong would lose his position as the Minister of War. No matter who pleaded for him, it was useless. Even Consort Taizhen might not be able to do it. Military affairs were no trifling matter. As long as Zhangqiu Jianxiong wasn't the Minister of War yet, he would have to take responsibility for it. I have brought the candidate for the next Southern Protector General. Zhong Tong, stand up and greet Lord Wang. Zhangqiu Jianxiong suddenly turned to a muscular, dark-skinned man on his left and said. Yes sir. When his name was called, the tall and sturdy black-faced man quickly stood up from his seat. He was a little flustered. This was clearly the first time he had participated in such a gathering. Lord Wang, I am Xianyu Zhongtong. Greetings, Lord Wang. Buzz. As though a massive boulder had fallen on his heart, Wang Chang's body trembled violently. He abruptly turned his head over. So, he's Xianyu Zhongtong. Wang Chong stared at the figure before him as waves of emotions surged in his heart. Other than Zhangqiu Jianxiong, there were two other people whom Wang Chong wanted to meet the most. One of them was Xianyu Zhongtong, and the other was Zhang Wentuo. Wang Chong thought that Xianyu Zhongtong wouldn't be around, but who could have thought that the man who had been drinking with his head lowered would actually be the future Southern Protector General, Xianyu Zhongtong. Wang Chong carefully examined this future protector general. The general had a dark face and a thick chest, and he had a thick military style, but his expression was wooden and lacking in flexibility. He did not have the air of a great general that Wang Chong had imagined. Is this the successor that Zhangqiu Jianxiong has chosen for himself? Wang Chong shook his head. Every single one of the great generals and protector generals of the Tang dynasty was an outstanding individual. Every single one of these people could take charge of an area on their own, and they could even lead an army on a punitive expedition. But in Xianyu Zhongtong, Wang Chong couldn't see any of this. Putting aside the fact that this Xianyu Zhongtong couldn't compare up to the likes of Fomen Linta, Geshu Han, Gao Xianji, and Zhang Shougue, he couldn't even compare up to Yao Guangyi. At the very least, Yao Guangyi was much more formidable in terms of strategizing and planning than this man before him. Zhongtong's surname is Xiang, but after being an official for so long, everyone has gotten used to calling him Xianyu Zhongtong, forgetting about his real name. In southern, Zhongtong is a veteran who has served under me for many years. Of course, Zhongtong's capability isn't comparable to protector generals like Zhang Shougue and Fomen Linta, but he's a defensive general. I've rehearsed it before, and even if I were to lead the army and launch an all-out assault, it would still be difficult for us to defeat them. After my departure, Zhongtong will be more than sufficient to take over my position. Southern hasn't been in a war for more than a decade now, so what we need isn't offense but defense. Given Zhongtong's capability, regardless of whether it's Uzun's assault or the changes in Irai, he will be more than sufficient to fend them off. Zhangqiu Jianxiong patted Xianyu Zhongtong's shoulder with a gleeful expression. Annan had the 180,000 elites that he had left behind. In addition to Xianyu Zhongtong, a veteran general who was capable of defending the city, even if he were to leave, the city would still be as stable as an impregnable fortress. Zhangqiu Jianxiong was very satisfied with the affairs after his departure, as well as the candidate for the position of protector general. What Annan needed wasn't an aggressive general, but a defensive general. The more an enterprising person did, the more flaws they would easily reveal. On top of that, an aggressive general would also be ambitious. They wouldn't be content with a single area, and they would be difficult to control. On the other hand, a true defensive general would be able to guard his legacy and loyally carry out the strategies he had left behind when he was still in power. Wang Chong looked on coldly from the side, and the worry in his heart grew heavier. Zhangqiu Jianxiong was the true commander of the empire, the southern protector general. He possessed outstanding military capabilities. His choice of Xianyu Zhongtong as his successor wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. But this was precisely what Wang Chong was worried about. Zhangqiu Jianxiong only thought that Xianyu Zhongtong was a defensive general, and he was more than capable of guarding the legacy he had left behind. But perhaps, not even he could have imagined that there would come a day when Xianyu Zhongtong would have to leave the territory that he knew like the back of his hand and go on the offensive. From a defensive general, he would become a defensive general. If a person who was only skilled in defense were to go on the offensive, the outcome would be obvious. There's no need to stand on ceremony, General Xianyu. Since Brother Zhangqiu thinks that I'm qualified for the position of Southern Protector General, this matter shouldn't be a problem. Wang Zhen nodded in response, paying no heed to Zhangqiu Jianxiong's words. He wasn't interested in military affairs, and this wasn't his field of expertise either. As for Xianyu Zhongtong, he didn't pay too much attention to him either. The previous Protector General had the right to recommend the successor. The current war god, the Crown Prince's imperial tutor, Wang Zhongxi, had recommended Geshu Han, and Fomen Linta had recommended Gao Xianji. Clearly, Zhangqiu Jianxiong had this right as well. There's also this Wang Gongzi, Wang Chong. Don't underestimate him just because he's young, but he's a well-known figure in the capital. At such a young age, he has already met the emperor. There aren't many in the younger generation who can match up to him. Besides, there's probably no one in the world who doesn't know of this Wang Gongzi. In order to become the Southern Protector General in the future, you'll have to get closer to this Wang Gongzi. Unexpectedly, after introducing Wang Zhen, Zhangqiu Jianqiong went on to introduce Wang Chong, who was standing beside him. Lord, you're flattering me. Wang Chong is still studying in the Kunwa training camp, and he doesn't have any official position on him yet. I'm not worthy of your praise. Wang Chong hurriedly replied. Regardless of whether it was Zhangqiu Jianqiong or Xianyu Zhongtong, one was the future Minister of War while the other was the future Southern Protector General. Both of them were influential officials in the military. Wang Chong didn't have any official position on him yet, so how could he dare to accept such a bow? Wang Gongzi, you're too kind. On the other hand, Xianyu Zhongtong didn't think too much about it. Upon hearing Zhangqiu Jianqiong's words, he turned around and bowed respectfully to Wang Chong, causing Wang Chong to feel a little embarrassed. Lord Xianyu is too polite. Wang Chong quickly stood up and returned the greeting. Zhong Tong, Wang Gongzi is an influential figure in the capital. You're not familiar with the bureaucracy, and this is your first time coming into contact with it. If you have any problems in the future, you'll have to consult this young Master Wang. Zhangqiu Jianqiong pointed a finger at Wang Chong said. Ha ha ha, Brother Xianyu, Lord Zhangqiu is right. Young Master Wang is someone who can even persuade the King of Song. It's definitely not a bad idea to get closer to him. Yang Zhao also chimed in from the side. He and Wang Chong were sworn brothers, although this relationship couldn't be revealed to the public. Nevertheless, Zhangqiu Jianqiong was still aware of it. Seeing how highly Zhangqiu Jianqiong regarded this sworn brother of his, Yang Zhao felt that it was a matter of face. Speaking of which, this was also a huge credit to him. Wang Gongzi, I'll be counting on you in the future. Xianyu Zhongtong glanced at Wang Chong and said. Xianyu Zhongtong was a pure martial artist. This was his first time entering the capital, as well as his first time coming into contact with the influential officials of the capital. Even though he had a slow and reserved personality, Xianyu Zhongtong wasn't a fool. The young man on the other side came from a family of ministers and generals. Just this background alone was enough to surpass many others, and it wouldn't be a problem for him to be conferred a noble title in the future. Not to mention, this young man was a rare genius. Xianyu Zhongtong knew that the reason why the Protector General was able to enter the capital was due to this low-profile young man. Ha ha ha, we're all brothers, there's no need to stand on ceremony. Yang Zhao laughed heartily. Come, come, come. Let's drink. Cheers. Another round of toasting and mingling, the atmosphere was joyous and harmonious. Lord Zhangqiu, the defenses of the Southern Protectorate Manor are currently weak. If Ozan were to make use of this opportunity to invade the east, what would we do? Will the Southern Protectorate Manor be able to withstand him? All of a sudden, a discordant voice sounded. In an instant, the entire tavern fell silent. However, when they saw that ignorant person speaking, Yang Zhao, Wang Zhen, and Xianyu Zhongtong were stunned. Wang Gongzi. Zhangqiu Jianqiong looked at Wang Chong with a slight frown. He didn't expect it to be Wang Chong. Chonger, what are you doing? Lord Zhangqiu is the Southern Protector General. Haven't you considered this matter? Do I need you to tell me? Wang Zhen reprimanded sternly. Wang Chong's words were extremely offensive. To put it mildly, he was disrespecting Zhangqiu Jianqiong. But to put it mildly, he was cursing Zhangqiu Jianqiong. Zhangqiu Jianqiong was brimming with ambition for this trip to the capital. Wang Chong's words were taboo, cursing Zhangqiu Jianqiong's misfortune. Wang Chong stared unblinkingly at Zhangqiu Jianqiong with a fiery gaze. He knew that his big uncle was reminding him that he had gone overboard with his words. But Wang Chong had no intention of backing down. It was impossible for him to stop Zhangqiu Jianqiong now. He had already made up his mind to enter the Bureau of Military Personnel, and anyone who dared to stop him would be his enemy. Xianyu Zhongtong's position as the future Southern Protector General was already set in stone. Zhangqiu Jianqiong had thought deeply before deciding on this candidate, so there was no way he would allow anyone to change his mind. All possibilities were sealed. Wang Chong could only try to use his own methods to change his fate. This kind of method might offend some people and make some people feel unhappy. But Wang Chong had no choice but to do it. Fate had already delivered an opportunity to him. Zhangqiu Jianxiong, Xianyu Zhongtong, Yang Zhao, and all of the generals of Jiannan. Chapter 273. Hee, it's fine. Waving his hands, Zhangqiu Jianxiong suddenly burst into laughter and stopped Wang Zhen. So Wang Gongzi is interested in military affairs as well. But then again, how could the younger brother of a general not be interested? It'll only benefit him in the future. As expected of a protector general, Zhangqiu Jianxiong managed to resolve the awkwardness with a wave of his hand. He, that's right, that's right. I've interacted with Wang Gongzi a few times, and he is indeed interested in military affairs. It's rare for me to meet Lord Zhangqiu here, so I knew that he wouldn't let this opportunity slip by. Ha ha ha. Yang Zhao reacted swiftly and tried to mediate the situation. Upon hearing Zhangqiu Jianxiong's words and Yang Zhao's agreement, the atmosphere in the banquet eased up once more. The generals of the Annan Protectorate who had been rather dissatisfied with Wang Chong nodded, accepting this explanation. Wang Chong's father, Wang Yan, and his elder brother, Wang Fu, were both commanders in the military, so it was only natural for them to be interested in military affairs. As one of the few protector generals of the empire, it was only natural for Lord Zhangqiu to seek his guidance. Wang Gongzi has lived in the capital for a long time, so it's normal for you to be unfamiliar with military affairs. Uzan is located on a plateau, and the journey south to Jiannan is long and treacherous, so it won't be easy. Furthermore, Uzan has never been to the mainland before, so they aren't familiar with the terrain. Unless someone guides them, it's impossible for them to gain anything. However, the Uzan people have a red face, which is completely different from us Tang people. Any spy would be able to tell with a glance. Furthermore, the Uzan people who enter Jiannan are under strict surveillance. Other than the Tea-Horse Road, the other cities on the mainland are strictly forbidden from entering. Besides, Uzan is a sparsely populated place, so it's difficult for news to spread. To put it bluntly, only you and I know that we have entered the capital, but the Uzan people might not know about it. Zhangqiu Jianxiong stretched out a finger and wagged it at Wang Chong with a smile. Roar! The commanders around him burst into laughter. As the elite generals of Annan, they knew the Uzan people better than anyone else. Wang Chong didn't say anything. His brows furrowed even more, and the worry in his heart deepened. Of course, we are not hoping for the enemy to make a mistake. I have managed the Annan Protectorate Manor for more than 10 years, and it has long since become an impregnable fortress. Moreover, all the rules and regulations have been fully restored. Even if I am not there, it can still operate normally. Moreover, there are still the 180,000 elite soldiers that I have painstakingly trained. Even if the people of Uzan come south, what is there to be afraid of? Zhangqiu Jianxiong harumphed coldly. His eyes were filled with disdain, and his expression was one of unparalleled arrogance. As the Southern Protector General, one of the few top-notch commanders of the empire, it was impossible for him to reach this position without some ability. Southern border had not been at war for more than 10 years, it was not because of geography, and even more not because of luck. It was strength. There were no weak soldiers under a strong general, and he, Zhangqiu Jianxiong, had no weak soldiers under him. The 180,000 elite soldiers were the greatest guarantee of the empire's southern border. To think that even Zhangqiu Jianxiong would be the same. Hearing Zhangqiu Jianxiong's words, Wang Chong felt an indescribable feeling in his heart. There was no doubt that Zhangqiu Jianxiong was a qualified commander. Jiannan wasn't as peaceful as it had been all along. The peace that he had enjoyed over the past decade wasn't a coincidence, but the result of Zhangqiu Jianxiong's meticulous training. With a complete system, a large army, and countless experienced commanders, Zhangqiu Jianxiong was no ordinary commander. He was definitely qualified to be a commander. But not even Zhangqiu Jianxiong could have imagined that the calamity of the southwest and the northwest would start from the Annan Protectorate manor that he had suppressed. All 180,000 elites would perish in battle. Zhangqiu Jianxiong's Annan Protectorate manor would become the first protectorate in the history of the empire to be disbanded due to a crushing defeat. Life comes from hardship, and death comes from ease. Even the Annan Protector General, Zhangqiu Jianxiong, harbored such a careless mentality, let alone Xian Yuzhongtong, who had been influenced by him. I was intending to keep Zhangqiu Jianxiong in Jiannan, but from the looks of it now, even if he were to remain there, it would still be unavoidable. Wang Chang's heart was agitated, and an indescribable sorrow welled up in him. When Zhangqiu Jianxiong said these words, there was a hint of pride in his voice. Wang Chong could sense that Zhangqiu Jianxiong was extremely confident in his plans in Annan. But it was precisely because of this that Wang Chong felt an inexplicable sense of sorrow. That tragedy in the southwest. Wang Chong had always thought that it was just a coincidence that could be easily changed. But it was only now that Wang Chong realized something. Regardless of whether it was Zhangqiu Jianxiong or Xian Yuzhongtong, no matter who was in power, this tragedy was unavoidable. The Tang dynasty had been peaceful for too long, and their arrogance had not only seeped into the royal court, but also into the military. Lord, have you ever thought about what would happen if Uzun and Meng Shizhao were to work together? Wang Chong suddenly asked. As soon as those words were spoken, the proud and smiling Zhangqiu Jianxiong's face abruptly warped. The entire room fell silent, to the point that one could hear a pin drop. The generals of Annan glared at Wang Chong with rage in their eyes. Wang Chong's words might have been a joke to him, but to the generals of Annan, there were countless comrades and even their families and children there. It was the place where they belonged for the rest of their lives. Wang Chong's joke wasn't funny at all. Isn't Wang Gongzi going a little overboard? The middle-aged scholar beside Zhangqiu Jianxiong stroked his mustache and said. He, Wang Gongzi, it's fine if you don't go overboard. Let's eat. Let's eat. Yang Zhao hurriedly tried to mediate the situation. He was perplexed. This sworn brother of his had always been a playboy with an outstanding disposition. But for some reason, he felt as though he had turned into a completely different person, asking about such sensitive matters. He was intending to matchmake Zhangqiu Jianxiong with the Wang clan, a clan of ministers and generals in the capital. However, if this were to continue, the banquet might not be able to proceed any further, and everyone ended up parting on bad terms. Meng Shizhao has just swept through Irai and conquered the other 5 Zhao kingdoms. King Zheluofeng is in high spirits and is at the peak of his ambitions. I heard that the Great Tang's decree, Meng Shizhao, is about to launch an attack. On the other hand, Uzun is currently building up his army, training a large number of cavalrymen, and purchasing steel. He has already amassed a force of 300,000 cavalrymen. Building up his army and expanding his army? If he doesn't have any ulterior motives, why would he do so? Annan is situated in the crevice between Uzun and Meng Shizhao, and both sides are countries of tigers and wolves. If the two sides were to ally with one another, have you thought about what will happen to Annan? Wang Chong stared at the other party and asked. Even before the renowned Protector General of Annan, Wang Chong didn't back down in the slightest. Annan's affairs concerned the lives of 180,000 elites and countless civilians. Even if he were to risk incurring Zhangqiu Jianxiong's wrath, there were some things that he had to say and do. In the current Annan Protectorate manner, from the Protector General Zhangqiu Jianxiong to the ordinary soldiers, no one had the slightest awareness of danger. At this moment, there had to be a person, a voice, to warn them. Otherwise, if tragedy were to befall them, it would be too late. Wang Chong was glad that he had met Yang Zhao on the streets outside the Bluebottle Pavilion. It was also because of Yang Zhao that he had obtained this opportunity. The reason why he had rushed to this banquet instead of cultivating on the spirit vein wasn't to curry favor with Protector General Zhangqiu Jianxiong, nor was it to rope in the generals of Annan. Rather, it was for this opportunity, an opportunity to speak before the generals of Annan. Even if he were to incur Zhangqiu Jianxiong's hatred, it didn't matter to him. Chong-er. Wang Zhen glanced at his nephew, and a hint of worry flashed across his eyes. Before this banquet, he did warn Wang Chong not to get too close to them, lest he brought trouble upon himself. But now, Wang Chong was standing on the opposite side of Zhangqiu Jianxiong. Wang Zhen wasn't worried about Zhangqiu Jianxiong. After all, he had come from a clan of generals and ministers for several generations. Even if Zhangqiu Jianxiong had some grudges against him, he wouldn't be able to do anything to the Wang clan. What Wang Zhen was worried about was Wang Chong. He could sense that there was something amiss with Wang Chong at the moment. "Brat, what nonsense are you spouting? Is this how you speak to an adult? Don't think that you're Duke Jiu's descendant. Don't go overboard." At the banquet, the generals of the Annan Protectorate Manor couldn't hold themselves back any longer. Their faces darkened, and they looked incredibly awful. It should have been a joyous occasion for the Protector General to invite them to a banquet out of goodwill. Yet, this young master of the Wang clan didn't know what was good for him. It was one thing for him to say that Uzun would launch an attack at any time, but now, he was saying that Uzun and Meng Shizhao would work together to attack the Annan Protectorate Manor. This was too much. Were they thinking that the Annan Protectorate Manor was too peaceful? "Lord Wang, we respect you as an influential official of the royal court, but what do you mean by this? Are you trying to humiliate Lord Wang?" Wang Chong was too young, and it wasn't appropriate for them to get angry with him. Thus, many of them vented their frustrations on Wang General. Those who didn't know what was going on might even think that it was Wang Zhen's doing. "Shut your mouths." At that moment, Zhangqiu Jianxiong's expression turned cold. He raised a few fingers and shouted at his subordinates to stop. As the Annan Protector General, he couldn't possibly be so magnanimous and magnanimous. Contrary to everyone's expectations, not only did Zhangqiu Jianxiong not get angry, he even had a contemplative look on his face. Initially, Zhangqiu Jianxiong thought that the lad before him was intentionally making a fuss. But when he heard the latter half of Wang Chong's words, he didn't get angry at all. Because what Wang Chong said was the truth. His spies had just received intelligence that the 7th Emperor of the Uzun Empire was currently training his troops by the Qinghai Lake, recruiting the herdsmen and training the cavalry. On the other hand, Meng Shizhao's Jelifeng was indeed growing more and more arrogant and disrespectful toward the Tang dynasty. This was something he could sense more clearly than anyone else. Meng Shizhao was a vassal state of the Tang dynasty. In the past, Jelifeng still had some respect for him. But now, there were many orders that even he couldn't carry out anymore. He was only pretending to obey them. The latest news he received was that Jelifeng had just dismissed the Prime Minister and other officials who were close to the Tang dynasty in Meng Shizhao, and he had recently promoted a few youths and warmongers from Meng Shizhao. This wasn't good news for the Annan Protectorate Manor. It was clear that Meng Shizhao and the Uzun Empire were disloyal to the Tang dynasty. However, it just so happened that Zhangqiu Jianxiong wanted to enter the Bureau of Military Personnel, and he wanted to leave this matter to his successor. Yet, he didn't expect a 15-year-old lad from the Wang clan to expose this matter before him. Has the Wang clan's intelligence network reached such a level? In that instant, Zhangqiu Jianxiong shot a deep glance at Wang Chong as countless thoughts flashed across his mind. A moment later, Zhangqiu Jianxiong's gaze fell on Wang Zhen, who was standing beside Wang Chong. In his heart, Zhangqiu Jianxiong still found it hard to believe that the words he had just spoken were the idea of a young lad like Wang Chong. In the depths of his heart, Zhangqiu Jianxiong was more willing to believe that it was Wang Zhen's idea. Wang Zhen's silence further confirmed his conjecture. Wang Zhen is an influential official of the royal court, and he has the right to enter the royal palace to meet with the emperor. For him to say those words through the mouth of his nephew, it can't be without reason. Could it be that this is the will of the Holy Emperor? Zhangqiu Jianqiong thought. What he didn't know was that he had guessed wrongly. All of this was Wang Chang's own idea. Wang Zhen's trust in this nephew of his had reached a level that made one's hair stand on end. It wasn't just him, the king of Song was the same as well. Thus, even though he didn't know why Wang Chong would do such a thing, once Wang Chong did something, neither Wang Zhen nor the king of Song would stop him. Because they knew that this child would never do something without a motive. Chapter 274. Thinking that Wang Chang's words came from Wang Zhen, Zhangqiu Jianqiong dared not let his guard down. Chong Gongzi is astute and eager to learn. Coming from a clan of ministers and generals, it's a good thing for you to have such thoughts. Don't think too much into it. Zhangqiu Jianqiong waved his hand, first stopping his subordinates, and then he turned to Wang Chong with a faint smile, his expression brimming with vigor. Meng Shizhao and Uzun aren't the first geniuses to appear in the empire, but does Chong Gongzi know that the situation you speak of has never happened before? Meng Shizhao and Uzun are from the Arai and the Highlands respectively. They are of different languages, races, and even their skin colors are different. Furthermore, our Central Plains Tang dynasty is like a sharp knife that separates them. From the start to the end, the two countries have never had the chance to interact with one another, needless to say, ally with one another. The hearts of men are filled with suspicion. Even two hands are unable to coordinate with one another, needless to say, two empires. Furthermore, with such a massive army, who will command whom? Who will be the leader and who will be the subordinate? Chong Gongzi has never been on the battlefield, so it's understandable that you aren't aware of the affairs of the military. Zhangqiu Jianqiong tapped his index finger lightly on the table. As the Southern Protector General, he couldn't be any more familiar with Uzun and Meng Shizhao. If Uzun and Meng Shizhao intend to attack the Central Plains together, they must mobilize at least 200,000 soldiers each. How are they going to command an army of 400,000? What's the timing? How are they going to mobilize and coordinate their movements? Chong Gongzi, you're still young, so don't underestimate these matters. An army of several 100,000 isn't just a few hundred or a few thousand. How can they be mobilized so easily? Besides, even if they were to ally with one another, with 100,000 elites and a city at their back, wouldn't they be able to fend off their attack? As long as they can stall for some time and wait for the army of the royal court to arrive, no matter how many soldiers they have, they will still be reduced to ashes. Putting everything else aside, the army closest to Jiannan is the Big Dipper army of Longxi. This was an army established by great General Wang Zhongxi. Even though Geshu Han was the new commander-in-chief, the Big Dipper army was made up of Han men. The Big Dipper army has accumulated plenty of experience in dealing with Uzun's cavalry. If such a situation were to occur, the Big Dipper army would surely be mobilized. In addition, he could also mobilize troops from the other borders. Since the founding of the Tang dynasty, there has never been a situation like what you described. War was not a child's play. No matter how ambitious Jelifeng was, no matter how young he was, he still had to think things through. Once you offend the Tang dynasty, you have to consider the consequences of the Tang dynasty's wrath. That's not something that Irai Meng Shizhao can bear. At the end of his words, Zhangqiu Jianqiong harumphed coldly. Meng Shizhao was different from Uzun. Meng Shizhao was a vassal state of the Tang dynasty. Vassal states were those that were influenced by Confucianism and could be occupied, but were not. If Meng Shizhao dared to go against him, he would have to consider the consequences. Lord, Wang Chong doesn't know whether Meng Shizhao will be able to form an alliance with Uzun, but it is a fact that Meng Shizhao has sent an envoy to contact the 7th Uzun. Wang Chong sat upright, and his words shocked everyone present. Zhangqiu Jianqiong, Xianyu Zhongtong, and the other generals of Jiannan were shocked. Chong Gongzi, what do you mean by that? You said that Meng Shizhao contacted Uzun to form an alliance, is that true? Zhangqiu Jianxiong asked grimly. Initially, he thought that Wang Chong was just seeking advice from him. After all, as the scion of a general, it was normal for him to do so. However, Wang Chong's words had already exceeded the scope of seeking advice. It was already within the scope of military affairs. If Meng Shizhao were to ask Uzun for an alliance, it would not be a small matter. The southwest was under his jurisdiction, at least until he entered the Ministry of War. If something went wrong, everyone present would be implicated. Not long ago, I got to know a noble young master from Irai. His father was a high-ranking official in Meng Shizhao. According to him, Jelifeng had already sent a trusted minister as an envoy to Uzun to express his intention of forming an alliance. That young master has a good impression of our Tang dynasty and doesn't want to start a war with our Tang dynasty. Plus, I treated him with great hospitality. That's why he said this unintentionally when he was drunk. However, he sobered up after getting drunk. Realizing that he had made a slip of the tongue, he hurriedly returned to Irai the next day. He didn't even bid farewell. The general was the Annan Protector General, which was why Wang Chong had said such a thing. I don't mean to offend you, Wang Chong said. Those words abruptly caused the atmosphere in the banquet to turn heavy. The generals in the pavilion glanced at one another with grim expressions on their faces. Even Yang Zhao's expression froze as he realized the severity of the situation. Chong Gongzi, pardon me for asking too much, but what is the surname of that noble from Irai? Zhangqiu Jianxiong asked gravely. Chen. Wang Chong said. Seeing that he had attracted the attention of all the generals of the southwest, Wang Chong inwardly said, I apologize. The matter at Nanzhao was no small matter. It concerned the lives of 180,000 elites of the Tang dynasty and dozens of cities in the southwest, as well as the lives of nearly 1 million civilians. In order to be wary of the generals from Jiannan and make preparations for the future, he could only resort to such underhanded means. Chen. Zhangqiu Jianxiong lowered his head in contemplation. He couldn't be any more familiar with the upper echelons of Meng Shizhao. Thinking back, there was indeed an official surnamed Chen by Jelifeng's side. Furthermore, this person had accompanied Jelifeng on a diplomatic mission to the Tang dynasty in the past. Could the words of Duke Jiu's grandson be true? Was Jelifeng plotting a rebellion, intending to ally with Uzun to deal with the Tang dynasty? Jelifeng is an ambitious person who doesn't care about the consequences. What he wants is only his own ambition. Also, Lord Protector General has also said that. In a one-on-one fight, Meng Shizhao is definitely no match for the Tang dynasty. Thus, if he wishes to succeed, he has to contact Uzun. Irai and Meng Shizhao are far apart, separated by the Tang dynasty. Regardless of what request Uzun has for Meng Shizhao, even if it means bowing down to him, Jelifeng will surely agree to it. After all, this is all in name only. Even if Uzun wants to do something, he can't bypass the Tang dynasty and ask for Meng Shizhao's help. This plan of driving the tiger to swallow the wolf was definitely in line with Meng Shizhao's interests. At the very least, Jelifeng can completely break free from the Tang dynasty's control. Seeing that his words were effective, Wang Chong immediately struck while the iron was hot and inculcated his words. As for Uzun, the conflicts between him and the Tang dynasty are increasing day by day, and he has also fought against the Tang dynasty several times against the Tang dynasty. Even if he can't get anything out of the alliance with Meng Shizhao, as long as he can suppress the Tang dynasty, it will be beneficial to him. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. If Meng Shizhao requests an alliance, as long as he can confirm the sincerity and authenticity of Meng Shizhao's alliance, there's an extremely high chance that Uzun will agree to Meng Shizhao's request. Zhangqiu Jianxiong stared at the youthful face of this youth, a look of shock in his eyes. Even Xianyu Zhongtong could sense that there was something unusual about this earnest youth, and a solemn look appeared in his eyes. At the very least, none of the surrounding generals of the southwest dared to think that he was spouting nonsense. For the first time, everyone sensed the extraordinary weight of this youth. Although this youth from the Wang clan was young, he was able to hit the nail on the head with regards to the relationship between Uzun and Meng Shizhao. Before this, they had all believed that this youth was spouting nonsense, a curse, a deliberate insult to the Protector General. But at this very moment, they couldn't help but think that Wang Chang's words made sense. Even though Meng Shizhao and Uzun had never worked together before, it wasn't impossible for them to work together. Just as Wang Chong said, Meng Shizhao could make use of Uzun to break free from the control of the Tang dynasty and become an independent kingdom. On the other hand, Uzun could make use of Meng Shizhao to deal a blow to the Tang dynasty and wash away the humiliation of being defeated in the hands of the Tang dynasty. Putting aside anything else, just to deal a blow to the Tang dynasty, Uzun would be willing to form an alliance with Wang Chong. More importantly, everyone thought that the Uzun Empire wouldn't descend into the east easily. After all, the Uzun Empire had never touched Jiannan, let alone ventured deep into the mainland. As such, they knew nothing about Jiannan. If they were to wage war on a land that they knew nothing about, the strength of the Uzun Empire would surely be greatly reduced. While Uzun Empire wasn't familiar with the mainland, Meng Shizhao was. Every year, countless merchants would enter Jiannan from Irai. Even the civil and military officials would frequent Jiannan. With Meng Shizhao leading the way and acting as an insider, the final weakness of Uzun Empire disappeared. Even Zhangqiu Jianqiong had to admit that the words of the Wang clan's Qilin's son weren't impossible, but highly probable. For a moment, his heart couldn't help but sink. Slowly raising his head, he glanced at the young man before him, and the feeling in his heart suddenly changed. Before coming to the capital, Zhangqiu Jianqiong had heard of this young man's reputation. In the regional commander's incident, this young man was undoubtedly the center of attention, and he had stirred up the hearts of many generals in the military. However, hearing about it was one thing, and experiencing it for himself was another. Even though he had helped Wang Chong in the regional commander's incident, his impression back then was that the young man was fearless, and the conflict between the Hu and Han was indeed in line with his interests. However, the current situation was completely different. The southwest was his territory, and regardless of whether it was Meng Shizhao of Irai or Uzun of the west, Zhangqiu Jianqiong knew them like the back of his hand. Yet, this young man was able to dominate his territory, and yet, he was still able to hit the nail on the head. For the first time, Zhangqiu Jianqiong felt that he had underestimated the young man. The reason why he was able to host this banquet at the Ten Sun Tavern was due to Wang Chong's help. But more than that, it was because Wang Chong was Duke Jiu's grandson and nephew. It was because of the prestigious identity behind him. But all of a sudden, Zhangqiu Jianqiong realized that he was wrong. Even if the young man before him was stripped of his prestigious background and his identity as Wang Zhen's nephew, his talent was still dazzling. It can't be a coincidence that this young man is able to attract the attention of so many people. Unknowingly, everyone in the Annan West Protector General's attitude toward Wang Chong had undergone a subtle change, becoming one that was filled with respect. Chapter 275. Zhongtong, did you hear Wang Gongzi's words? Reining in his thoughts, Zhangqiu Jianqiong turned to look at Xianyu Zhongtong by the side. Zhangqiu Jianqiong didn't dare to underestimate the young man before him. Yes, Lord Protector General. Xianyu Zhongtong stood up and replied respectfully. After we return, conduct a strict check on the borders of Irai. All of the merchants traveling between Meng Shizhao and Uzun are to be monitored, especially those traveling along the T-Horse Road. All official documents are to be checked, and those without official documents are strictly prohibited from entering or leaving. After I enter the Bureau of Military Personnel, you will be the Southern Protector General. You must heed Wang Gongzi's words. You mustn't allow any chance of an alliance between Meng Shizhao and Uzun. Zhangqiu Jianqiong said. I understand. I'll use a flying kite to contact the generals in Jiannan and have them keep a tight watch on the borders. Xianyu Zhongtong said. On. We can't afford to lose anything in Annan. Once the matter here is settled, you should return to Jiannan. Zhangqiu Jianxiong said. Reaching this step was already his limit. It was impossible for him to guard the entire area to the south of the Jianghu Pavilion. If Jelifeng really wanted to form an alliance with Uzun, there was nothing he could do about it. But deep in his heart, Zhangqiu Jianxiong still believed that even if Meng Shizhao wanted to form an alliance with Uzun, the matter wouldn't be as simple as it seemed. What Wang Chong said wasn't impossible, but it wasn't guaranteed to happen. Besides, the Tang dynasty wasn't one to be trifled with. With the advantage of geographical advantage, the Tang dynasty wouldn't be at a disadvantage. Looking at Zhangqiu Jianxiong and Xianyu Zhongtong speaking, Wang Chong wanted to say something, but he hesitated. Until now, Zhangqiu Jianxiong still thought that the 180,000 elites of the Annan Protectorate Manor had a city to rely on. However, Wang Chong could not tell him that the future was not the 180,000 elites of the Tang dynasty sitting in the city waiting for Meng Shizhao and Uzun to attack. On the contrary, due to a special reason, the 180,000 elites of the Annan Protectorate left the territory they were familiar with and were completely wiped out. Wang Chong couldn't say any of this out loud. It wasn't just because of the Fate Stone's restrictions. Wang Chong couldn't possibly reveal this information in advance, and even if Wang Chong did say it, no one would believe him. Wang Chong couldn't be complacent. He couldn't possibly say that he had been reborn, so he knew what would happen in the future. Putting aside Zhangqiu Jianxiong and the others, even big uncle Wang Zhen would take him for a lunatic. No one would believe such a shocking statement. At that time, he could only adapt to the situation. Looks like this is the only way. Wang Chong sighed deeply. He knew that this was the limit of what he could do. At the very least, he could use this banquet to give these generals of the Southwest some hope. At the very least, they wouldn't be defenseless in the future. As for the rest, he could only think of another way. Chong Gongzi is a young hero. Your insight and courage are few among your peers. Your future is bound to be limitless. After appraising Xianyu Zhongtong, Zhangqiu Jianxiong turned to look at Wang Chong said with a smile. Lord, you are flattering me. I'm just making a casual remark. I hope that Lord won't take offense. Wang Chong hurriedly said. Ha ha ha, to be able to gain such insight from a casual remark, that's even more incredible. There's no need for Chong Gongzi to be humble. Come, let's drink. Let's toast to Chong Gongzi. Zhangqiu Jianxiong raised his wine cup. Zhu Gongzi. Zhu Gongzi, that the crowd echoed in agreement. Draining the wine cup in a single gulp, Zhangqiu Jianxiong shot a glance at Wang Chong, deep in thought. Wang Yan of the Wang clan has limited aptitude, and he can only be considered to be above average in the military. He's overly upright and lacks flexibility. However, the children he gave birth to are each more formidable than the last. It's one thing for the eldest son, Wang Fu, to have such insight at such a young age is truly astonishing. With just these children, the Wang clan will probably be filled with talents in the future. I advise Zhong Tong to get closer to this child in the future, but even I have to get closer to this child. Zhangqiu Jianxiong's heart was in turmoil. This gathering had only lasted for a short period of time, but it had completely changed Zhangqiu Jianxiong's opinion of Wang Chong. Extraordinary insight, sharp eyes, and sharp talent in military affairs, as well as his background, this youth's future was bound to be limitless. In Zhangqiu Jianxiong's heart, he no longer viewed Wang Chong as a child, but an existence who could stand on equal footing with him. Even though Wang Chong's standing was far beneath him, he was already worthy of his investment. Amidst their conversation, the dishes were served. A tall and beautiful Goguryeo lady brought a plate of phoenix-tailed shark fins over with a few other ladies. The phoenix-tailed shark fins were stewed to a crisp, and a thick layer of sauce was poured over it. This sauce was made from more than a dozen ingredients, and the aroma of the phoenix-tailed shark fins whetted one's appetite. Humph. All of a sudden, a cold harumph echoed in the air. Just as the tall and beautiful Gogrian lady was about to put down her plate and retract her plate, a hand as sharp as a steel clamp suddenly gripped her wrist tightly. "Gu guest, what are you doing?" This sudden sight caused the lady to exclaim in shock. She stammered in the language of the Central Plains, and her face paled in fright. At the same time, the other ladies were also stunned. There was a sudden silence in the pavilion. Countless gazes from all directions turned to look at the hand that was holding the woman's wrist. Everyone around the table stopped drinking and turned their gazes over. In an instant, the atmosphere became extremely bizarre. "Gu guest, we don't provide such services here. Please let go of me." Behind the tall and beautiful lady, another lady who was delivering food stammered nervously. Hearing those words, Wang Chong chuckled inside. He picked up the wine cup on the table and took a sip. For the great Southern Protector General to be called a lustful person, he would surely become a laughing stock if word got out. Even though he didn't know why Zhangqiu Jianxiong was grabbing the lady's wrist, Wang Chong could guess that something must have gone wrong. Since Zhangqiu Jianxiong had specially chosen the Ten Sun Tavern as his host, Wang Chong was more than happy to watch the show from the side. "What is this?" Zhangqiu Jianxiong stared at the lady with a frosty expression. The atmosphere in the tavern also plummeted, as though an ice cavern. "Phoenix-tailed shark fins?" the lady asked doubtfully. "Humph, why don't you take a bite then?" Zhangqiu Jianxiong picked up the chopsticks on his plate, picked up a mouthful of shark fins, and sent it over to the beautiful lady. Hua! Upon seeing that mouthful of shark fins, the stammering lady suddenly panicked, as though she had been violated. It was as though the shark fins that were being passed over were some sort of savage beast. "Do it!" Behind the beautiful lady, a maid whose face was pale from fright a moment ago suddenly bellowed in Gogrian. Tossing aside the tray in her hand, she whipped out a dagger from her waist and stabbed it toward Zhangqiu Jianxiong with lightning speed. Hua hua hua. Plates of food and water were splashed toward the crowd. In an instant, the feeble ladies suddenly turned into Asuras from hell, charging toward the crowd with their swords. "Do it! Kill them! Avenge King Sojurim! Kill all of these Tang people! Leave none alive! For the glory of the Empire!" A series of short and intense shouts in Gogrian, carrying a bone-chilling killing intent, sounded from the surroundings. Peng peng peng, the doors of the booths around the hall were jolted open, and the assassins tore off their disguises and charged at the group with lightning speed. Dense killing chi surged in the air. Clumps of stellar energy flickered with halos, covering the sky and earth, filling the entire pavilion. And a significant portion of them were actually targeting Wang Chong. As I expected. Wang Chong held the wine cup in his hand as he sensed the frenzied attacks coming from all directions, but he wasn't surprised at all. This was the Ten Sun Tavern, the center of the Gogurians, as well as the place of the highest standing. After the previous operation, there was probably no Gogurian in the capital who didn't recognize him. It would be a wonder if they could hold themselves back after seeing him, the culprit, appear. It was already impressive that they could hold themselves back until now. It's a pity that you chose the wrong place and the wrong opponent. Wang Chong sneered coldly as he raised the wine cup in his hand and gulped it down in a single gulp. Boom! Almost at the same moment that Wang Chong raised his wine cup and gulped it down, boom! There was a flash of light, and a surge of golden stellar energy, pure and majestic, gushed forth. In that instant, the halo dissipated, and time seemed to have frozen. Other than Wang Chong and the others, everyone else froze in midair, maintaining the posture they were in before the attack. "You overestimate yourself." An indiscernible cold harumph sounded in their ears, and in the next instant, with a loud explosion, the waitress, the assassins, and everyone else was blasted into smithereens. A rain of blood and bones rained down from the sky, but not a single one of them came close to the group. "Who?" The wind was vast and mighty, and sand and stones flew everywhere. In an instant, all of the blood rain, along with the skeletal remains, was pushed out, breaking through the pavilion and scattering onto the street. On the other hand, other than some blood stains on the floor, the tavern was completely clean. The 40 top-notch Gogurian assassins had already vanished from the face of the earth. In an instant, the 10-Sun Tavern fell deathly silent. All of the hubbub and silence vanished, leaving only silence in its wake. The sounds of intense battle on the second floor beneath Wang Chong's feet also vanished in an instant. Opposite Wang Chong, Zhangqiu Jianxiong was still seated on the chair, not moving his palm in the slightest. If not for Wang Chong, no one would have known that Zhangqiu Jianxiong was the culprit behind that massacre. A Saint Martial realm expert was simply too powerful. Wang Chong had once reached that realm, so Wang Chong didn't panic in the slightest. In fact, he even drank a cup of wine calmly. These Gogurians would never know what kind of expert they were facing. This wasn't an ordinary expert, but a protector general of the empire. Sitting before him, Wang Chong felt even safer than hiding in the midst of an army. These Gogurians have made a mistake in their calculations and underestimated the wrong person. Do you know why I chose to hold this banquet in the 10-Sun Tavern? Zhangqiu Jianxiong poured himself a cup of wine before slowly lifting his head. On his face was an extremely cold and callous expression. It was only at this moment that Zhangqiu Jianxiong showed everyone the cold and cruel side of him that ruled over the southwest and slaughtered countless enemies. As the marshal of the empire, it was impossible for him to rise to his current position if he didn't have some sort of iron-blooded means. However, Wang Chong knew that Zhangqiu Jianxiong's words weren't meant for him but for the survivors in the 10-Sun Tavern. I've heard that there has never been a protector general of the empire who became the minister of war. If there is, he will have to step on fresh blood. Today's banquet is to welcome me back from my long journey. There's no one in the army who doesn't drink blood. Chapter 276. Zhangqiu Jianxiong's eyes were brimming with killing intent. At this moment, even Wang Chong and Wang Zhen had grim expressions on their faces. The moment Zhangqiu Jianxiong revealed his identity, he was no longer the person who was chatting casually at the banquet. Instead, he was the protector general of the empire, one of the few commanders of the empire. Smelling the thick stench of blood in the air and listening to Zhangqiu Jianxiong's words, Wang Chong finally understood why this protector general would choose to host a banquet here on his first day in the capital. The assassination and encirclement in the capital, as well as King Sozhirim's death, couldn't have escaped Zhangqiu Jianxiong's eyes and ears. He must have known that his appearance would invite the Gogurians to assassinate him. He was doing this intentionally. Hosting a banquet at the 10-Sun Tavern wasn't just to borrow the yang energy of the 10 Golden Crows. The Southern Protector General's actions were far more violent and domineering than he seemed on the surface. He was using his blood as a sacrifice to pave a path to the central courtyard. And the Gogurians were the perfect target. However, Wang Chong had no objections to it. How could a commander who had bathed in blood on the battlefield not have a thirst for blood? Which commander didn't have their hands dyed red with blood? Wang Chong offers a toast to Protector General. With such thoughts in mind, Wang Chong suddenly filled his cup and raised it. Ha ha ha, good. Zhangqiu Jianxiong was taken aback for a moment before he burst into laughter. A hint of admiration flashed in his eyes. How could a descendant of a clan of generals not have any guts? He thought that this lad would be frightened by the previous scene and lose his appetite. Yet, to think that the other party would remain calm, not showing the slightest hint of panic. His composure didn't seem befitting of someone of his age at all. Chong Gongzi is indeed a tiger of our clan of generals. I'll drink this cup of wine. On the other hand, Zhangqiu Jianxiong raised his cup and drained it in a single gulp. Brother Jiexin, this nephew of yours is truly a dragon among men. He has guts, insight, and charisma. Given time, he will surely have a bright future ahead of him. Zhangqiu Jianxiong looked at Wang Zhen and said. Wang Zhen's expression changed slightly. The Wang clan was not a purely scholarly family. When the old master was young, he had led troops into battle, and his hands had seen plenty of blood. Wang Zhen didn't even bat an eyelid at an assassination attempt in a tavern. What truly moved him was Zhangqiu Jianxiong's words. To be able to obtain the praise of the Tang dynasty's great crocodile Zhangqiu Jianxiong at the age of 15, it would definitely be of great benefit to Wang Chang's future development. This was different from the regional commander's incident. This kind of praise from the upper echelons of the imperial military was extremely difficult to obtain. Whether it was Zhangqiu Jianxiong, Foman Linta, Gao Xianji, or Zhang Shogui, at their level of strength and status, they treated their words like gold. It wasn't that they were stingy with their praise, but at their level of strength and status, every word they uttered would have a unique impact, especially in the military. As the saying went, spilled water could not be retrieved. If a person they had taken a liking to or praised ended up achieving nothing, or if they had great ambitions but little talent, their accomplishments would be limited. This would have a massive impact on the other protector generals and commanders. Thus, in the Tang dynasty of the Central Plains, it was very rare to hear a protector general or commander of an empire praise someone publicly. Even if he was displeased, he would never say it out loud or in public. As the saying went, words of gold and jade. The higher one's status, the more this was true. If Wang Chong were to enter the military in the future, Zhangqiu Jianxiong's praise would be extremely beneficial to him. Just this praise from Zhangqiu Jianxiong would be able to reduce the difficulties Wang Chong would face in the future. To be able to receive such praise before even officially entering the military, Wang Chong was probably the only one in the capital who could do so. Thank you, Lord Protector General. Wang Chong reacted quickly and respectfully expressed his gratitude. Wang Chong had never imagined that a cup of wine could be exchanged for Zhangqiu Jianxiong's praise. I'm not praising you. Work hard. Zhangqiu Jianxiong gestured with his eyes, and a general of the southwest immediately walked over, took out a special silver chopstick, and plunged it into the bowl of shark fins. Swish! In the blink of an eye, the silver chopstick turned black, and the tip of the chopstick was even tinged with a bluish-violet color. At the sight of this, the faces of everyone in the pavilion turned extremely ugly. This thing is very poisonous. Wang Chong was inwardly alarmed. Silver chopsticks would at most turn black upon contact with poison, but this chopstick was tinged with bluish-violet. It was clear that the poison had reached a pinnacle, far surpassing that of ordinary poisons. These people had first delivered 4 non-poisonous appetizers to numb the crowd before delivering the true feast. They had truly put in a lot of effort. Even if they failed, they still had other means of assassination. This was the territory of the Gogurians, and it was far too easy for them to gather the Gogurians for an assassination. Even if they were to walk past the crowd, they would only think that they were from the Ten Sun Tavern. However, they had only miscalculated the identity of the people around them and Zhangqiu Jianxiong's capability. Poisoning in front of a Saint Martial realm expert, you're really trying to show off in front of an expert, you're seeking death. Glancing at the bloodstains on the floor, Wang Chong didn't feel the slightest pity for the culprit. Those who aren't of our tribe should be spared. There was no need for us to show mercy to those who aren't of our tribe. Bring the dishes up. If you don't wish to die, prepare this banquet properly. Otherwise, everyone in this tavern will die. Since it's a traitor, you must have accomplices. Kill everyone in the surrounding streets as well. Zhangqiu Jianxiong said coldly. His voice reverberated throughout the entire tavern. In the booths, the kitchen, the first floor, the second floor, the third floor. There were still many assassins who hadn't been dealt with yet, but they were all intimidated by Zhangqiu Jianxiong's means. Zhangqiu Jianxiong couldn't be bothered with them. Regardless of whether they were assassins, chefs, or maids, regardless of their identities, this feast had to be prepared for him. Even if he was a burly assassin, he would have to obediently serve as a cook for him today, cooking up a feast that was both beautiful and fragrant. Cold sweat trickled down the foreheads of the assassins in the Ten Sun Tavern. The strength of these people had far exceeded their expectations. Moreover, he had never seen such a domineering person. The Golden and Red Tavern on the third floor was deathly silent, and the air was suffused with an intense aura of death. A cold voice sounded from the third floor. Even though they couldn't see anything, the aura of death in the air was more than 100-fold stronger. That fearsome threat of death left everyone's hair standing on end. But what left the Goguryeo assassins the most fearful was Zhangqiu Jianxiong's final threat. Why? We are the only ones who are here to kill you, why must you implicate the innocent? Countless pairs of eyes stared at the wooden floor of the third floor where Zhangqiu Jianxiong and the others were seated. Deep indignation, rage, fear, and helplessness could be seen in their eyes. Only a small portion of the Goguryons in the shops around the Ten Sun Tavern had participated in this operation, and most of them were innocent. Most of the assassins were already prepared to be killed in the event of failure. But now, the nature of the situation was completely different. There was no doubt that the expert of the Tang dynasty on the third floor would do as he said and kill everyone on the street. Death wasn't scary. However, a meaningless death that would implicate the innocent and ordinary people was unacceptable to them. In just a short moment, under the urging of some invisible force, the group of assassins in the Ten Sun Tavern began to move. Some chopped the vegetables, some cooked the vegetables, some washed the dishes. The entire Ten Sun Tavern seemed to have become an intricate gear. After a momentary pause, it began to move once more, as if nothing had happened at all. All right, I can continue with the banquet now. Sensing the commotion in the tavern, Zhangqiu Jianxiong sneered coldly before turning his attention back to the banquet on the third floor. Pa! With a light flick of his finger, the venomous phoenix-winged fish tail flew out of the tavern and onto the street. Wang Chong watched on coldly from the side. He couldn't be any clearer about the changes in the atmosphere in the tavern. After killing the assassins, he actually managed to convince the Goguryons in the Ten Sun Tavern to swallow their anger and continue cooking, as if nothing had happened. Even Wang Chong was impressed by Zhangqiu Jianxiong's means. There isn't a single protector general of the Tang dynasty who is weak. In my previous life, the Southwest has been peaceful for far too long, so I didn't hear much about this protector general. Now that I think about it, I've probably underestimated him. Wang Chong thought. Those who are good at fighting don't rise to fame, this was the impression Zhangqiu Jianxiong gave off. As Wang Chong thought, he soon recalled the other purpose of his trip. Right, Protector General, may I know if you can give me a token? Wang Chong suddenly asked with a smile. Oh. What do you want my token for? Zhangqiu Jianxiong asked curiously. If it were anyone else who had made such a request, it would have seemed rude and offensive. However, Wang Chong's request as a junior felt that it was reasonable and natural. Thus, Zhangqiu Jianxiong was only a little curious. I have never left the capital before. If there's a chance in the future, I would like to pay a visit to the Southwest Jianghu Pavilion to do some business. If I have Lord Chong's token, it will be much more convenient. Wang Chong said half-jokingly. Oh. Zhangqiu Jianxiong's shoulders twitched as he leaned forward with an interested look on his face. He hadn't forgotten that the person before him was an expert at doing business. May I know what kind of business Gongzi Chong wishes to do? If that was all, there would be no need to go through so much trouble. Zhong Tong is here now, and the affairs of the Southwest will be managed by him. If Gongzi Chong wishes to do business, we can grant you any convenience you require right now. Zhangqiu Jianxiong said. This could also be considered a show of goodwill. He had come to the capital alone, and even if he could become the Minister of War in the future, he would still need the help of the other great clans. In this aspect, Consort Taizhen was of no help at all. The imperial harem was not allowed to interfere in politics, and this was an ironclad law in every dynasty. Zhangqiu Jianxiong needed allies, and a very powerful one at that. Zhangqiu Jianxiong didn't just intend to treat Wang Zhen and his nephew to a meal. Wang Zhen didn't say anything, but his brow furrowed imperceptibly as he shot a glance at Wang Chong. How could Zhangqiu Jianxiong's thoughts be hidden from him? But what surprised Wang Zhen the most was still Wang Chong. What is this child up to? I clearly told him earlier that Zhangqiu Jianxiong was in too muddy of a situation, and while it wasn't good to offend him, it wasn't good to get too close to him either. What is this child up to? Wang Zhen's brow furrowed, his mind in turmoil. Zhangqiu Jianxiong wanted nothing more than to get close to the Wang clan, and Wang Chong was the one who was giving him this opportunity. Wang Zhen wanted to stop him, but in the end, he chose to remain silent. Chapter 277. Hehe, it's not much of a business deal. I want to buy a plot of land in Jiannan. Wang Chong chuckled. Where? Zhangqiu Jianxiong asked curiously. Lion Rock Hill. Wang Chong said. Hearing Wang Chong's words, Zhangqiu Jianxiong, Xianyu Zhongtong, and the other generals stared at one another in bewilderment. They thought that Wang Chong wanted to buy a plot of land in the flourishing area of Annan. But to think that it would actually be there. Wang Gongzi, are you certain? Lion Rock Hill is a barren land. Only those who are on their way to Irai would pass through the area. On normal days, not a single person can be found in a radius of several dozen li. Xianyu Zhongtong said. They were from the Annan Protectorate Manor, so they couldn't be any more familiar with the situation south of Jiannan. The so-called Lion Rock Mountain sounded grand, but in fact, it was just a small, obscure mountain. Given that it was so close to the borders of the Annan Protectorate Manor's territory, it could be said to be completely worthless. Xianyu Zhongtong couldn't understand why a scion of a general clan would want to buy such a small hill. Hehe, I heard from a friend that the T-Horse Road's business is quite good, and he intends to build a base there to rest and stock up his goods. This way, it would be more convenient for him to interfere in the business of the T-Horse Road. Wang Chong said. I see, so that's the case. The T-Horse Road is indeed a profitable business. It's no wonder that Gongzi would want to interfere. Zhangqiu Jianxiong nodded in understanding. In truth, the T-Horse Road was a trade in Irai tea and Yusang horses, and there was a huge profit to be made from this trade. Of the 10 major clans in Jiannan, at least 7 or 8 of them had such businesses. It wasn't surprising that the Wang clan would want to interfere in this matter. Zhongtong, I need you to help Wang Gongzi settle this matter after we return. Zhangqiu Jianxiong turned to Xianyu Zhongtong and instructed. Yes, I'll get it done after we return. Xianyu Zhongtong said respectfully. A Lion Rock Mountain was not worth much money. Xianyu Zhongtong also understood that the Protector General had taken the initiative to pull strings with the Wang clan. In order to succeed the Southern Protector General position, he needed the help of the Wang clan. Hehe, Chong Gongzi, this token is for you. If you want to go to Annan in the future, this token may be of great convenience to you. After instructing Xianyu Zhongtong, Zhangqiu Jianxiong flicked a golden token toward Wang Chong. Thank you, my lord. Wang Chong was overjoyed. This was an unexpected harvest. Not only did he subdue the Lion Rock Massif, he also obtained a personal token from Zhangqiu Jianxiong. During this trip to the Ten Sun restaurant, Wang Chong had obtained the 2 things he wanted the most. It could be said to be perfect. Whoosh! I've done all I can. I'll do my best. The rest is up to luck. Wang Chong heaved a long sigh of relief, and he felt much more at ease. Lion Rock Massif was a small mountain located at the southern border of the Tang dynasty. Naturally, Wang Chong didn't intend to purchase the mountain for business. Even though the profits from the T-Horse Road were decent, it wasn't attractive to Wang Chong. No matter how great the profits from the tea leaves were, it couldn't compare to the profits from the Hyderabad ores, not to mention, there were so many people who wanted a share of the profits. The reason why Wang Chong wanted the Lion Rock Massif was due to its geographical location. To the west of the Lion Rock Massif was a vast expanse of flat land. That was where the southwest battlefield of the empire would be located. Wang Chong had checked the map of the Bureau of Military Personnel, and the entire region spanning several hundred li was devoid of any natural defenses. And the Lion Rock Massif was the only obstacle in that region. The reason why Wang Chong bought the Lion Rock Massif wasn't to build a base. Instead, he wanted to build a city, an unprecedentedly huge city. A barrier that could protect the 180,000 elites of the Tang dynasty at the most crucial moment when the situation was dire. Such a barrier would surely cost a huge sum of money. It wasn't 10,000, tens of thousands, or even 100,000 gold taels, but millions of gold taels. In fact, it might not even be enough. But regardless of how much it would cost in the future, Wang Chong didn't care at all. Wang Chong didn't accumulate gold for no reason. The future Lion Rock Massif was the only thing he could do for the future battlefield. The Gogurians served the dishes swiftly. Perhaps it was because they were holding a knife to their necks, or perhaps they knew that with a single word from Zhangqiu Jianxiong, everyone in the vicinity would be beheaded. In any case, it didn't take long for a table full of appetizing dishes to be served. When the serving maids were served, their heads were lowered, and their shoulders and arms were trembling uncontrollably. However, regardless of whether it was the generals of the southwest or Wang Chong, none of them treated them as ordinary maids. I heard that Chong Gongzi is interested in Governor Zhang Wentuo. While they were eating, Zhangqiu Jianxiong suddenly brought up a matter. Yes. Wang Chong didn't deny it. Instead, he shot a glance at Yang Zhao. The latter smiled awkwardly and hurriedly turned his head to the side. Needless to say, Wang Chong knew that it was due to Yang Zhao's capability. He had only mentioned this matter to him before. That person over there is Wentuo. Zhangqiu Jianxiong suddenly pointed to a burly man at the end of the long banquet table. His head was lowered, and it was clear that he was out of place. Lord Protector General. That man raised his head and looked at Zhangqiu Jianxiong with a dazed expression. Clearly, he hadn't heard what Zhangqiu Jianxiong had just said. It's him. Wang Chong was astonished. In the Tang dynasty, the military and the government were separated. As the governor, Zhang Wentuo had great independence. Even though he was under the control of the protectorate manor, it wasn't that severe. Wang Chong didn't expect the burly man seated at the end of the banquet table to be Zhang Wentuo. With a smile, Wang Chong quickly retracted his gaze. I'll talk to him another time. Wang Chong thought. Even though Wang Chong wanted to have a chat with him, he knew that this wasn't the right time, place, or occasion for a meeting. After staying in the Ten Sun Tavern for a while longer, Wang Chong and big uncle Wang Zhen left together. Chonger, what are you thinking about? Didn't I tell you? You mustn't get too involved in Zhangqiu Jianxiong's affairs. After leaving the Ten Sun Tavern, a deep frown appeared on Wang Zhen's forehead. With so many people in the tavern, it was hard for him to say anything, but now that he was out of the tavern, he could no longer hold himself back. Zhangqiu Jianxiong was a protector general of the empire. If he were to succeed, the Wang clan wouldn't stand to benefit at all. If he failed, the Wang family would be too deeply involved, and there would only be 100 disadvantages and no advantages. Politics was a dangerous place. Those people wouldn't disregard Wang Chong just because he was a child. To outsiders, Wang Chong represented the entire Wang clan. Big uncle, do you still remember my father? Wang Chong lifted his head. Zhengji. Wang Zhen was taken aback. This matter is related to him. Wang Chong nodded. Big uncle, do you still remember His Highness the King of Song recommending my father for the conferment of a marquis? Wang Zhen nodded. Even though my father has been recommended by the King of Song, his qualifications are still too shallow. On top of that, the Bureau of Military Personnel has moved my father and big brother to the vicinity of Jiannan, which is very close to the Southern Protectorate manor. If my father wishes to be conferred a marquis in the future, he will need Zhangqiu Jianxiong's help. Wang Chong said. Not too long ago, he received news that his father and big brother had already moved to the vicinity of Jiannan. Even though the process was a little complicated, and it took a little longer. Nevertheless, the King of Song still managed to move his father and big brother over. I see. As expected, upon hearing Wang Chang's words, Wang Zhen nodded thoughtfully. If it was for his third brother's conferment, it was still acceptable. After boarding the carriage, Wang Zhen and Wang Chong left. Meanwhile, in the Ten Sun Tavern, after Wang Zhen and Wang Chong bade farewell to the officials, only the generals of the southwest were left in the room. Jian, what do you think? Since there were no outsiders around, Zhangqiu Jianxiong suddenly turned around and looked at the mustached middle-aged strategist by his elbow with a solemn expression. That lad is lying. The middle-aged strategist known as Jian chuckled as he picked up the wine cup on the table and drained it in a single gulp. Ah! Zhangqiu Jianxiong was taken aback. He was intending to ask about Wang Zhen, but he didn't expect Jian to bring up Wang Chong instead. He, does Lord Zhangqiu still think that the key figure of the Wang clan is Wang Zhen? Jian put down his wine cup and asked with an unfathomable smile. Isn't that the case? Zhangqiu Jianxiong was taken aback. Lord Zhangqiu is confused. Yang Zhao, Lord Yang, let me ask you. You have secretly approached Wang Zhen before, right? Did he agree to stand up for you? Jian turned to look at Yang Zhao. That's not the case. Yang Zhao replied honestly. He had stayed in Jiannan, so he knew the standing of the other party by Zhangqiu Jianxiong's side. Then, when did Wang Zhen step forward? Was it after you approached Chong Gongzi? Jian stroked his beard and asked with a smile. This. It seems like it. Yang Zhao recalled the matter, but he still couldn't understand why the military advisor would ask such a question. Do you still not understand? The key to this matter isn't Wang Zhen but that 15-year-old child. Jian chuckled. There was an indescribable meaning in his smile. Also, didn't you see the banquet earlier? When Chong Gongzi tried to curry favor with Lord Protector General, Lord Wang Zhen was clearly unwilling to do so. Yet, not only did he not stop him, he didn't even say a word. I've looked into it previously, and Lord Wang is known for his strictness. He clearly sensed that something was amiss, but he didn't stop him at all. Isn't that enough to prove that something is amiss? You mean to say that that child is the core of the Wang clan? Zhangqiu Jianxiong couldn't conceal the shock in his eyes. Even if he isn't, it's not far from it. At the very least, that's what Lord Wang Zhen thinks. If I'm not mistaken, that Chong Gongzi is the future clan head of the Wang clan. If Lord Protector General wishes to stand firmly in the capital, it would be best for you to get closer to Chong Gongzi. Jian said with a smile. Throughout the entire banquet, he didn't speak much. In fact, his presence was even more inconspicuous than those minor officials invited to the banquet. But after Wang Chang's departure, the hierarchy of authority in the room became clear. Other than Zhangqiu Jianxiong, Jian was the true second in command of the Protectorate of the Southwest. In fact, his standing was even higher than that of Xianyu Zhongtong. Didn't that Chonger have a favor to ask of us? Lord, this is a great opportunity. Jian leaned back slightly and said with a lazy smile on his face. I understand what I should do. Chapter 278. Translated by Hypersheep 325. After traversing through numerous alleys, Wang Zhen's carriage abruptly came to a halt around a dozen streets away from the Ten Sun Tavern. Wang Chong leaped out of the carriage and bade farewell to big uncle Wang Zhen before sending the carriage off with his gaze. Gongzi, where are we heading to? Eagle, Solitary Wolf and Steel Arms followed Wang Chong down from the carriage and asked. We're going to look for someone. Wang Chong smiled. Glancing at the golden token in his palm, he quickly kept Zhangqiu Jianxiong's token into his robe. After meeting Xian Yuzhongtong, obtaining Zhangqiu Jianxiong's token, and learning that Zhang Wentua had come to the capital with him, it was time for him to look for that person. Following a dark and damp alley, they soon left the affluent region of the capital. Before them, a series of short and dilapidated houses gradually appeared. This was the slums. Wherever there was a rich, there would be a poor. The same went for the capital. After turning a few alleys, the houses before them grew more and more dilapidated. What is Gongzi doing here? Eagle, Solitary Wolf and Steel Arms were getting more and more curious. The three of them could be considered to be familiar with the capital, but they had never been to this place where Wang Chong had come to. As the heir of the 9th Gongzi, a clan of ministers and generals, they couldn't understand why a noble like Wang Chong would come to such a dilapidated place. This should be the place. Wang Chong looked at the residence before him and said. According to the standards of the slums, the mansion in front of him should be quite grand. However, the decaying wooden door, the wet steps covered in moss, and the grass growing at the base of the walls were more than enough to show that this wasn't some grand residence. Ping ping. Wang Chong walked up the steps and knocked on the door knocker. A moment later, the door opened, and a head peeked out. Who are you looking for? That person had sleepy eyes, and he seemed to be a servant. We are looking for Master Zhang. Wang Chong smiled and said politely. The servant immediately came to his senses. He glanced at the luxurious clothes that Wang Chong and the others were wearing and quickly opened the door. The room was very dark, and there was only a simple oil lamp that emitted a dim light. An old man in his 50s with a face full of wrinkles was lying on a bamboo chair, smoking a pipe. Wisps of bluish-purple smoke lingered in the room, and he looked very dispirited. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to find their way here. Who are you people? Although he was talking to the four of them, the old man's eyes were out of focus, and he was smoking his pipe nonchalantly. Old mister, I'm here to ask for your help in building a house. Wang Chong said. Humph. When he heard Wang Chong's words, the old man was stunned for a moment. He finally showed a slightly serious expression, but he only smiled coldly. He closed the ash in his tobacco pipe and refused without hesitation. I don't know where you heard the news that I'm here. However, I advise you to give up on that thought. Ever since I left the Ministry of Works, I will never build a house for anyone else. This person was actually from the Ministry of Works. Behind Wang Chong, the Eagle, Steel Arms, and Solitary Wolf were astonished. Most of the people in the Ministry of Works were highly paid, and even ordinary officials were well off. At the very least, they wouldn't live here. No one could have imagined that someone from the Ministry of Works would live here. It seems like Gongzi is looking for him for that matter. The three of them thought to themselves. When Wang Chong attended Zhangqiu Jianxiong's banquet, they were there as well, just that they weren't seated at the table. The trio was well aware that Wang Chong had bought the Lion Rock Ridge to build a base here. It seems like Gongzi wants him to help build a base. On the other hand, Gongzi, given how well hidden this place is, how did Gongzi know that he is here? The trio was perplexed. Elder Zhang, it's not just building a house. I want to build a city. Wang Chong said with a smile. His attention was completely focused on the elder before him. The reason why Wang Chong knew that the elder was here was simple, and it had nothing to do with his memories of his previous life. Back when Wang Chong was still a profligate scion, he had once met the elder on the city gate tower. Wang Chong recognized him immediately. As a qualified profligate scion, this was the most basic ability one should possess. A city? Even though the elder wasn't interested in the four of them, he couldn't help but widen his eyes upon hearing Wang Chong's words. However, his face soon darkened, replaced by rage. Gongzi, are you joking with this old man? I don't care which family you are from, but scram right now. As he spoke, he pointed his tobacco pipe outward. He had seen many things in his life, and he had seen all sorts of people. There were many who had made all sorts of requests. But none of them was this ridiculous. Build a city? Did he think that this was some child's play? Was this something that a single person could build? Did he know how much money it would cost? How much manpower and resources would it take? Even the prestigious clans in the capital wouldn't dare to make such a claim. Was this lad insane? Or did he come here just to tease him? Hee, Elder Zhang, if I say it's true, then it's true. If I wanted to tease you, why would I come all the way here? Wang Chong said seriously. This old man was a little stubborn, and it wouldn't be easy to convince him. However, the base in Jiannan, as well as many of his future plans, would require the capabilities of this craftsman from the Bureau of Works. In Wang Chong's plans, Elder Zhang was an important figure. In fact, he was almost on par with Zhang Munian. It was just that the timing wasn't suitable. Only now, with Zhangqiu Jianxiong's connection, did Wang Chong find an opportunity to invite him out of his seclusion. Lad, it's not that I'm looking down on you. Do you know how much money it takes to build a city? Zhang Shouji said disdainfully. He still couldn't believe that this lad was here to invite him to build a city. 1,000,000 taels. What? Copper coins? Zhang Shouji sneered coldly. Gold. Wang Chong replied seriously. As soon as he finished speaking, the dark, dim room suddenly fell into a deathly silence. Zhang Shouji's pipe hung in midair, and he even forgot to refill it. The eagle, steel arms, and solitary wolf widened their mouths in shock. 1,000,000 taels. Does Gongzi have that much money? And gold? Does building a base require so much money? That the trio was even more shocked than Zhang Shouji. They had been following Wang Chong for quite some time now, and they had vaguely heard of this Gongzi's deeds. They knew that this Gongzi was skilled in business. However, they didn't know that Wang Chong's capability had already reached such a level. This was especially so for Solitary Wolf. He had accepted countless missions in the past. No one understood the significance of 1,000,000 gold taels more than him. Despite working hard for so many years, his earnings didn't even match up to a fraction of what Wang Chong had earned. 1,000,000 gold taels, this was simply unimaginable. This is already comparable to the entire wealth of a prestigious clan. Gongzi's capability in business is truly astonishing. Lone Wolf thought to himself. Lad, are you joking? Zhang Shouji's face froze in disbelief. He wanted to say 100,000 or 200,000, but who could have thought that Wang Chong would directly offer 1,000,000 gold taels? This was far beyond his expectations. Chong. Without saying a word, Wang Chong pulled down 2 tokens from his waist and tossed them over. One was Zhangqiu Jianxiong's personal token, and the other was the Wang clan's token. Zhang Shouji took the 2 tokens in his hand. His eyes, which had been indifferent at first, suddenly trembled when he saw the emblem and symbol on them. Only then did he realize that the background of the young man before him was far beyond his imagination. Old mister, our Gongzi is a man of his word. His words are worth their weight in gold, and he would never lie. Old mister, you can trust this. The eagle chimed in. Humph. In just a short moment, Zhang Shouji harumphed. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed Wang Chong's 2 tokens back. Even though I don't know how Gongzi managed to find this place, Gongzi need not waste your efforts. Back then, when I left the Bureau of Works, I said that I would never build anything for anyone ever again. You should just give up on that thought. Zhang Shouji placed his tobacco pipe on the flame, lit it, and began puffing on it once more, as though he was unwilling to talk to Wang Chong anymore. Back then, when he left the Bureau of Works, many prestigious clans came to look for him, and they offered him generous conditions. But in the end, he didn't agree to a single one of them. He was truly disheartened. He had been the supervisor of the Bureau of Works for his entire life, and he had built countless magnificent palaces. But in the end, he was treated like this, and he was even expelled from the Bureau of Works. This humiliation was unbearable. From then on, Zhang Shouji made up his mind to never come into contact with anything related to construction. "Old Zhang, why are you in such a hurry to reject me?" Wang Chong smiled. He had long heard of Zhang Shouji's temper. All of the outstanding masters in the Bureau of Works had the same temper. However, if he didn't have absolute confidence, he wouldn't have come over. 200,000 gold taels, as long as old Zhang agrees to come out of retirement. I'm willing to provide 200,000 gold taels for old Zhang to continue his research on that secret recipe, and I'll provide even more resources in the future. Wang Chong suddenly extended 2 fingers and smiled mysteriously. Upon hearing the word secret recipe, Zhang Shouji's heart skipped a beat, and he almost swallowed the stem of his tobacco pipe. How old is this lad? How does he know about that matter? Zhang Shouji looked as if he had seen a ghost. Lad, don't speak carelessly. Do you really know about the research? Zhang Shouji was a little tempted. If this lad was really talking about that matter, it would be a great temptation for him. Of course. Wang Chong faintly smiled. Old Zhang, didn't you embezzle money from the palace because of this? You were almost sent to the Ministry of Justice to be beheaded. Zhang Shouji blushed, which was rare for him. Even if he was thick-skinned, he still felt embarrassed when this scandal was exposed in front of him. 200,000 gold taels may not be enough. Young man, you have to think carefully. That is a bottomless pit. I know you come from a prestigious family, but this research is basically a bottomless pit. No matter how much you invest, you may not succeed. If it was that simple, I would have succeeded in the Bureau of Works. How could it be leaked to this extent? Zhang Shouji said seriously, which was rare for him. In more than a decade, this was the first person who expressed his support for him to continue his research. This made Zhang Shouji have a good impression of Wang Chong. Although he might not agree to it. Of course. Not only can I support you with 200,000 gold taels, 300,000 gold taels. I can even provide you with a cement formula. Wang Chong said. Cement. Chapter 279. Zhang Shouji had spent half his life in the field of civil engineering, and he was the most senior official in the Bureau of Works. He knew everything related to civil engineering like the back of his hand. However, Zhang Shouji had never heard of such a thing before. Isn't the strongest brick wall adhesive what you've always wanted to research? This is the formula for it. Perhaps, it might be of some help to you. As Wang Chong spoke, he passed over a piece of paper that he had prepared beforehand. This was the first cement formula in this world. This wasn't the first time Wang Chong had done something like this. But every single time, there was an indescribable feeling in his heart. In the world of martial arts, everything was fine, but the logistics and transportation were extremely inconvenient. Pigeons could reach the capital in a few days. But if they were to travel by horse carriage, it would take at least a month or even longer. Even someone of Zhangzhou Jianxiong's caliber took more than 20 days to reach the capital from Jianghu. Sometimes, the competition between countries was not only about the military strength of both sides, but also a considerable part of the competition was about the logistics of both sides. Wang Chong had been the Grand Marshal of the Central Plains himself, so he couldn't be any clearer on this point. In a war, the side that could transport troops the fastest and send reinforcements earlier would have a higher chance of achieving victory. In a local war, this only concerned the victory or defeat of a single battle. But in a war between empires, this would determine the rise and fall of a nation, as well as the change in authority. But in this era, other than Wang Chong, no one had paid attention to this aspect. In Wang Chong's plan, cement was an extremely important component. Even though it seemed to have come from another world, just like hybrid rice, it wasn't a particularly profound technique. It was just that no one had been able to reach such a level yet. What Wang Chong had given Zhang Shouji was a basic cement formula. As for how to do it and how to produce it, Zhang Shouji would have to do it himself. The room was quiet. Zhang Shouji was indifferent at first, but under the dim light in the room, Zhang Shouji held up the list in his hand and glanced at it. Zhang Shouji's expression immediately changed. He had spent his entire life studying adhesives for bricks and stones. The thing that Wang Chong had given him was obviously a very powerful thing. This thing was even more powerful than the last thing he had researched. The balance in Zhang Shouji's heart was overturned. Under the dim light, Zhang Shouji looked at the list in his hand for a long time. Wang Chong didn't disturb him and just watched silently from the side. "How is it?" Wang Chong said. Zhang Shouji didn't say anything. He held the prescription in his hand and frowned. He seemed to be hesitating and couldn't make up his mind. Wang Chong was taken aback. Then, he seemed to have thought of something. He slowly walked forward and whispered in Zhang Shouji's ear. "If old Zhang agrees to it, I can also agree to help you deal with General Su." This sentence was the straw that broke the camel's back. "I agree. As long as you can help me get that bastard Su Shizi down." Zhang Shouji nodded his head fiercely. Deep hatred shot out from his eyes. Back then, if that bastard Su Shizi hadn't framed him and tampered with the adhesive he developed, causing cracks to appear in the palace and the walls to collapse, he wouldn't have been expelled from the Ministry of Works and ended up in such a state. Zhang Shouji didn't want him to die, but he didn't want him to. As long as he left the Ministry of Works, everything would be fine. "Gongzi, you aren't lying to me, right? I know that you have a powerful background, but Su Shizi is now a general in the palace. It won't be easy to get him down. Does the Wang clan have the ability to do so?" Zhang Shouji suddenly recalled something and asked gravely. You don't have to worry about that. It won't be easy, but it's not impossible. You just have to wait for my news." Wang Chong waved his hand, a relaxed expression on his face. It wasn't easy to get rid of a general in the palace, and even the Wang clan didn't have the ability to do so. Even the most powerful of clans couldn't extend their hands into the royal palace. However, there was no need for Wang Chong to go through so much trouble. As long as he spoke to the consort Taizhen of the palace, it would be a walk in the park for him to replace the general in the palace. After successfully convincing Zhang Shouji to help him manage the city base in Jiannan, Wang Chong quickly left the remote and dilapidated residence. The sky outside had already darkened. A light breeze blew past, and Wang Chong's mind was in turmoil. The construction of a city was no small matter, and what Wang Chong wanted was a city that could house 180,000 soldiers, provide them with sufficient rations, and defend against the enemy's attacks in times of crisis. This city had to be huge and sturdy, and it had to be equipped with all kinds of fortifications, water, food, and horse rations. None of these were small matters. Even 1,000,000 gold taels would be far from enough. But even so, Wang Chong didn't mind it at all. Wang Chong felt that the help he could provide was simply too little. The current him was still far from the level where his words carried enormous weight, and he could easily decide the policies of the empire with a few casual words. Given Wang Chong's current capability, the city on the Lion Rock Ridge in the southwest of the empire was already his greatest effort. Once I start building the city, the money I have on me will be far from enough. I have to earn more money first. It seems like I have to think of a way to push that matter forward. Wang Chong slowly raised his head, and his mind was in turmoil. His eyes slowly gazed into the depths of the pitch-black night sky. Flap flap flap. A moment later, a pigeon flapped its wings and flew across the void toward the Zhang family's residence in the capital. While the pigeon flew toward the Zhang family, more than 30 ingots of Hyderabad ore were also sent to the Zhang family. With the appearance of the Hyderabad ore, the number of Wuxia steel weapons in the capital increased by more than 30, and all of these weapons were sent to the palace. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Wang Chong wasn't a stickler for formalities. As the morning sun rose, thousands of golden rays fell from the clouds and sprinkled on the majestic palace of the Tang dynasty. The walls of the palace glowed in the morning light, as though it was a holy land on earth. At this moment, a figure dressed in court attire was walking alone through the golden palace walls. His head was lowered, and it seemed as though he was deep in thought. Even though there was no one accompanying him, the person's every movement exuded a powerful aura. Moreover, there was a purple token hanging from his waist that was 2 fingers wide, which further revealed this person's extraordinary identity. Within the palace, anyone who had such a purple token hanging from their waist was someone of extraordinary status and had a special status within the palace. This was because these purple tokens were not issued by the court, but by the current Holy Emperor. It won't be long before the annual Holy Emperor's review begins. I hope that His Majesty will be satisfied this year. Li Qinyu frowned, and his mind was preoccupied. He was a third-rank military official, but unlike the officials in the court, Li Qinyu didn't need to go to work in the morning, and he didn't participate in military affairs. He only needed to be in charge of the imperial army in the palace, and he reported directly to the Holy Emperor. The beautiful and luxurious token hanging from his waist was proof of Li Qinyu's identity. As the military official of the palace, or rather, the military official of His Majesty, Li Qinyu wielded great authority, even greater than some of the officials in the court who were in charge of military supplies. At the very least, the wealth that Li Qinyu could mobilize was far beyond imagination. However, this didn't make Li Qinyu happy at all. Instead, he felt immense pressure. As the military official of the imperial army, Li Qinyu had to satisfy the needs of 100,000 imperial army soldiers at the same time. More importantly, Li Qinyu had to satisfy His Majesty's requirements and satisfy the Holy Emperor. However, the quality of the weapons forged by the weaponry workshop and the swordsmithing clans wasn't satisfactory at all. The weapons forged by the weaponry workshop were of varying quality, and the production rate of the swordsmithing clans was too low. The number of weapons they used every year was almost the same as the number they purchased. With such a performance, it was hard to satisfy His Majesty. As the military official who reported directly to His Majesty, there was nothing remarkable about his performance that could leave a deep impression on His Majesty. Sigh, if this goes on. Even if His Majesty doesn't say anything, it'll be hard for me to continue on as a military official. Li Qinyu thought to himself. Ha ha ha. Just as Zhang Xian was feeling vexed, a burst of laughter suddenly sounded from the wall beside him, accompanied by the sounds of intense fighting. Due to the flourishing of martial arts in the royal palace, it was common for imperial army soldiers to spar with one another. Li Qinyu passed by this area every day, so he couldn't be any more familiar with such sounds. However, there was something different about today. Usually, the intense fighting would last for a long time, but today, it ended very quickly. Not only so, the sounds of the battle seemed to be different as well. It didn't seem to be the sound of ordinary weapons. Almost subconsciously, Li Qinyu stopped in his tracks. Again. Just as Zhang Xian was perplexed, the voice from the other side of the palace suddenly sounded indignant. Ha ha, bring it on. Even if you go at it 100 more times, you'll still lose. Another hearty voice sounded. Following which, the sound of weapons clashing sounded. Surprisingly, Li Qinyu didn't leave the palace. Instead, he remained outside the palace walls, listening to the Harken. In the royal palace, there were rules. Something like this was too unusual. It was very rare to encounter something like this. Li Qinyu's interest was piqued. Clang! This time around, the battle ended even faster than the previous one. Clang! The sound of a weapon snapping echoed. Due to the excessive force exerted, the tip of a sword flew high into the air, flew past the walls, and landed not too far away from Li Qinyu, stabbing into the sturdy red tiles of the royal palace. This is. In the instant that the tip of the sword landed, Li Qinyu's sharp eyes immediately recognized it, and his heart skipped a beat. Isn't this the famous saber forged by the Lu clan? Li Qinyu rolled up his sleeves and squatted down. He stretched out two fingers that were like iron pincers and carefully picked up the sword tip from the ground. That's right, it was the famous saber of the Lu clan. There was the insignia of the Lu clan on it, so there was no mistaking it. As a military official in the royal palace, he had to deal with such things on a daily basis, so he couldn't be any more familiar with them. The Lu clan was a rising clan in the capital, and they were the youngest among the renowned swordsmithing clans. But perhaps it was precisely for this reason that their swordsmithing clans were the best in terms of appearance, size, and quality. On top of that, as the Lu clan's swordsmithing output was higher, there were many of them in the imperial army. It was truly surprising that the Lu clan's famed sword was broken. But what left Li Qinyu even more astonished was that the cut was as smooth as a mirror. What kind of weapon is that? How could it be so sharp? Li Qinyu couldn't conceal the shock in his eyes. Even though the Lu clan's famed sword wasn't the most formidable, it was definitely top-notch. It wasn't an easy feat to break it. In order to make such a cut, the sword had to be extremely sharp. But despite being in charge of the imperial army's armaments for so long, Li Qinyu had never seen any weapon that could be so sharp. So, the battle ended because their sword was broken. A thought flashed across Li Qinyu's mind, and he suddenly understood something. However, Li Qinyu was even more curious about the weapon that broke the Lu clan's famed sword. Ha ha ha, good sword. It's indeed a good sword. Zhou Lai, do you want to do it again? A hearty voice could be heard from within the palace walls, unwilling to let go. Not again, not again. Huang Chang, aren't you just relying on the Wuxia steel sword you bought? What's there to be proud of? If you are capable, don't use the Wuxia steel sword and fight me one-on-one. The Imperial Guard who lost said. His last sentence caused Li Qinyu, who was standing outside the palace walls, to tremble. Chapter 280. One-on-one. You must be joking. When have you ever seen a tiger cutting off its claws to duel with another? From within the palace walls, the voice of the victor sounded. Huang Chang, sell it to me for 70,000 gold taels. Humph, don't even think about it. Huang Chang, this Wuxia steel sword only costs 55,000 gold taels. Even if I offer 70,000 gold taels, you can still earn 15,000 gold taels. At the very most, you can just buy another one. Hee, Zhou Ji, since you're so capable, you can just buy one yourself. Why are you giving me the money to earn? Do you take me for a fool? It wasn't easy for the Zhang clan to release the stock for several months, but they only managed to produce 30 Wuxia steel swords. With so many people in the imperial army, it's impossible for them to meet the demand. Right now, they are selling for 80,000 gold taels each, and there's no market for them. If Wang Gongzi were to pay for it himself, it would be even more expensive. Upon hearing those words, Li Qinyu finally decided to stop hiding and walked into the palace. What were you all talking about? Placing his hands behind his back, Li Qinyu held onto the sword tip and walked in slowly. Lord Li, on the training field, the three imperial army members were shocked to see Li Qinyu. They hurriedly lowered their heads. In the capital, there wasn't a single imperial army member who didn't recognize the military affairs officer, Li Qinyu. This was their true superior. All of the equipment, armor, stipend, and weapons of the 100,000 imperial army members had to pass through Li Qinyu's hands. Unlike them, he could enter the royal palace to meet the emperor at any time. If they were to offend him, not even the Grand Marshal would be able to reason with them if they were to deduct their equipment. There were many people in the royal palace, and the trio didn't expect to meet this person. One must know that this person rarely interacted with them. "Lord, we were only sparring with one another. We didn't do anything." Faced with Li Qingyou's questioning, the trio felt uneasy. "That's not what I'm asking. Can I take a look at that sword?" Li Qinyou pointed to the sword in the hands of one of the Imperial Army members. "This, of course." The Imperial Guard named Huang Chang agreed verbally, but his expression was one of extreme reluctance, as if his flesh was being cut off. He reluctantly handed over the Wuxia steel sword. Li Qinyou turned a blind eye to it and held the Wuxia steel sword in his hand. He first weighed it in his hand and then touched it. It's very heavy. Its actual weight was several times heavier than it looked. The surface is very smooth, but it's not just smooth. There are grooves on the blade, which should be designed to increase its lethality. Li Qinyou thought to himself. Once experts exchanged blows, one would know whether there was a real expert or not. Li Qin had dealt with weapons and armaments all his life. He had dealt with hundreds of thousands of weapons, so he was very familiar with the performance of weapons. There were many weapons that didn't even need to be tested. One could almost judge the quality of the weapon just by touching it, and it could even reach an extremely fine level. This meter-long sword was heavy and cold to the touch, as if touching a block of ice. The forging technique of this weapon was clearly different from that of ordinary weapons. At the very least, the weapons forged by the workshops of the royal court and the few clans in the capital weren't of this nature. This is a Wuxia steel weapon. Li Qinyou weighed the sword in his hand in bewilderment. The youngest son of the Wang clan, Wang Chong, had forged an incomparably sharp and indestructible sword at the Bluebottle Pavilion. Be it the sabers and swords of the Abbasid Caliphate, Karak Spazinu, or the famed sabers and swords of the Central Plains, none of them were a match for the Wuxia steel weapon. This legend had been spreading like wildfire in the capital 4 to 5 months ago. Naturally, Li Qinyou had heard of it as well. However, different from others, Li Qinyou had always scoffed at such rumors. He had never believed them. How could the birth of a new weapon be that simple? There was a saying that there were talents in martial arts. Some people were born smarter than others, possessing superior intelligence, superior cultivation speed, and a unique constitution. However, could it be possible for one to be born with a new forging technique? Which of the weapons that were still in existence hadn't been passed down for centuries, or even millennia? They had been perfected generation after generation. How could a brand new forging technique suddenly appear out of nowhere? Furthermore, it was able to slice through other famed swords as though they were tofu. Thus, Li Qinyou had never believed it. On top of that, the Wuxia steel weapon was extremely rare. Most people had only heard of it from legends, and only a few had seen it with their own eyes. Thus, Li Qinyou had never believed it. However, at this moment, Li Qinyou wasn't so certain. Clang! Before the trio could react, Li Qinyou's sword had already swept across the broken sword in the hands of one of the Imperial Army members. Chi! An inaudible sound echoed and the broken sword in the hands of the Imperial Army member snapped once more. The tip of the sword fell to the ground and pierced into the tiles. The trio was taken aback for a moment, but they soon recovered from their shock. Just based on the price of the Wuxia steel sword alone, it would be a miracle if the swords of the various clans in the capital could compare to it. However, Li Qinyou's perception was different. He couldn't sense the existence of the Lu clan's weapons at all. It was as though the sword had sliced through the air. This was the first time Li Qinyou had come into contact with such a weapon, and it was also the first time he experienced the sharpness of the Wuxia steel sword. Even with Li Qinyou's long experience, he had never come across such a fearsome weapon before. The sharpness of this weapon was unimaginable. Take off your armor. A thought flashed across Li Qinyou's mind, and he suddenly pointed to the armor on one of the Imperial Army members. The latter was perplexed. Yes, Lord. Even though the Imperial Army member was perplexed, he still obediently took off his armor. The military minister was in charge of the Imperial Army armory, so he had plenty of such armors. Chi La, with a wave of his hand, the heavy armor was silently sliced into two. Clang! It fell to the ground, and the cut was as smooth as a mirror. Even though Huang Chang and the other Imperial Army members were mentally prepared, they were still shocked by Li Qingyao's actions. However, it wasn't just the Imperial Army members who were shocked. Even Li Qingyu himself was shocked. SSSS. To think that it's real. Upon seeing the Wuxia steel, the first thing that came to Li Qingyao's mind was the Bluebottle Pavilion. It was said that this sword could cleave a metal mountain into two with a single slash. Those like Li Qingyu who weren't present at the scene would usually laugh it off, thinking that it was just a rumor. However, seeing was believing. Looking at the Imperial Army member's armor that was sliced into two, Li Qingyu was astounded. He didn't have the slightest bit of doubt in his heart. On the battlefield, regardless of whether it was his ally or foe, they would always use the best armor. Some of the elite heavy-armored cavalrymen wore armor forged from deep-sea Xian metal. Most of these armors were incomparably tough, and it would require 3, 4, or even more than 10 slashes to leave a mark on it. Otherwise, it would require a powerful external force to strike it. There was a limit to the parts that could be struck. There were very few armors like the Wuxia steel, which could be easily sliced apart. Li Qingyu had been in charge of the Imperial Army's weapons for more than a decade, so he was extremely sensitive to the value of weapons. Just like Zhao Fengchen, Li Qingyu immediately realized the might and value of this weapon once it was mass-produced. What did you say? This weapon costs 80,000 gold taels each? Isn't that a little too expensive? Li Qingyu stared at the trio with a deep frown on his forehead. Even if he searched through all of the sword shops in the capital, there wasn't a single sword that was as expensive as this one. Lord Li, don't think that it's too expensive. In the royal palace, there are many Imperial Army brothers who couldn't buy it even if they wanted to. Naturally, a good weapon isn't cheap. Upon hearing Li Qingyao's words, the Imperial Army member named Huang Chang relaxed. As long as the other party wasn't picking on them, everything else was fine. Besides, don't underestimate it. Just because it costs more than 10,000 gold taels each, it's already considered cheap. Think about it, how many people are there in the Imperial Army? There are at least 100,000 of them. However, there are only 40 to 50 swords in total, and this is the production of 4 to 5 months. There aren't enough monks and gruel. How can it possibly be enough? Furthermore, this price is the price of the Zhang clan. It wasn't forged by Wang Gongzi personally. If it was forged by Wang Gongzi personally, it would be worth far more than this. Privately, it has already exceeded 100,000 gold taels. The Imperial Army member named Huang Chang spoke gleefully. Clearly, he was proud of the fact that he had bought a Wuxia steel sword. Are there 2 other sellers of this Wuxia steel sword? Li Qingyu asked with a frown. Of course not. This is forged by Wang Gongzi and the capital's Zhang clan together. Otherwise, given Wang Gongzi's personality, wouldn't he only make 1 or 2 a month? Sometimes, he might not even make a single one at all. This time, it was another Imperial Army member who agreed with Huang Chang. However, even though it's from the capital's Zhang clan, I heard that it's Wang Gongzi who guards the final few stages of the forging. Thus, there shouldn't be a problem with the quality. The third Imperial Army member said. Everyone in the capital knew that the production rate of Wuxia steel weapons wasn't high. If it was just Wang Chang's capability, most of the Imperial Army members wouldn't be able to get their hands on such a powerful weapon. This was the reason why the capital's Zhang clan existed. No one minded the existence of the capital's Zhang clan at all. On the contrary, they were more than happy to see it happen. They couldn't wait for more of such weapons to appear. However, if it's Wang Gongzi who's the one, the price won't be this low. 200,000 gold taels. That was the price a few months ago. The commander bought one and treated it as a treasure. Everyone says that Wang Gongzi's weapon is priceless, and its true value probably exceeds 200,000 gold taels. In the Imperial Army, probably only the commander and the others are able to afford it. The trio couldn't conceal the envy in their eyes. Everyone knew that Wang Gongzi's weapons were unique. Every single one of them had a unique design, and lethality. Those weapons weren't just weapons, they were also exquisite works of art. Following which, Li Qinyu asked many more questions. It was as though he had discovered a brand new world. For the first time, he realized that there was a small market for Wuxia steel within the Imperial Army. For the first time, he realized that the legends of the Bluebottle Pavilion were all true. Slowly, some ideas began to form in Li Qinyu's mind. He suddenly knew how he should report to the Holy Emperor during the inspection today. I'll be taking this Wuxia steel sword with me. Come and get it for me 7 days later. With the Wuxia steel sword in hand, Li Qinyu hurriedly headed to the Taiji Palace where the Holy Emperor resided. Thinking of the brilliant idea in his mind, Li Qinyu couldn't help but feel his blood boiling. Chapter 281. Translated by Hypersheep 325. Zhang Shouji moved swiftly. After receiving Wang Chang's support and the prescription, Zhang Shouji left the shabby alley he lived in 2 days later. He gathered a large group of workers, craftsmen, and engineers from the capital and set off for the Great Tang's southwest without a moment's rest. Leaving together with them were Wang Chang's several 100,000 gold taels and a large group of guards from the Wang clan. Zhangqiu Jianxiong and Xianyu Zhongtong had already informed them of this matter, so there should be someone to receive them when they arrived. After settling this matter for the time being, Wang Chong turned his attention back to his cultivation. Wang. In the elegant and tranquil study room, there was a table and a chair, simple and unadorned. At this very moment, Wang Chong was seated cross-legged on the floor, cultivating silently. A powerful aura slowly emanated from his body. Compared to a few days ago, it was clear that it was much stronger. Even though he had just reached Origin Energy Tier 9 Pinnacle, Wang Chong's aura wasn't as simple as it seemed. The aura he exuded didn't feel like that of an Origin Energy Realm cultivator, but that of a true martial realm expert. At this very moment, Wang Chong focused all of his attention on the Guanyuan, Beikei, Fengping, and Luanli acupoints in his body. In a dimension invisible to the naked eye, surges of origin energy flowed through Wang Chong's body. Then, as though an ocean gushing into a small canal, they flowed into the miniature circulation within these acupoints. True Martial Little Dipper. This was the name of this miniature circulation that only a few people knew of. Under normal circumstances, it would take 1 to 2 years to advance from Origin Energy Tier 9 to true martial realm. Even the most talented martial arts genius would require at least half a year. But of course, it was rare for someone like his little sister to possess innate divine strength, with the exception of 8 characters of Yin. True Martial Little Dipper was such a technique. It was used in the later generations to help Origin Energy Realm cultivators reach true martial realm as quickly as possible. Even in the future, not many people knew about this technique. As for now, other than Wang Chong, no one else knew. The true martial realm was different from the Origin Energy Realm. The biggest difference was that almost all true martial realm martial artists could release their internal qi, and it was no longer limited to their bodies. But when Yuan Qi was used in actual combat, the nature was completely different. It became even more ferocious and destructive. This kind of origin Qi was called stellar energy. When a true martial realm expert made a move, the martial halos that burst out of their bodies were almost all Gang Qis. The nature of this thing was different from Wang Chang's vital energy. What Wang Chong was doing now was making use of the true martial Little Dipper's tiny circulation to compress the yuan qi in his body and change its nature, making it even more powerful. Then, he would use the astral energy to transform his body and make himself stronger. In other words, the true martial Little Dipper could allow Wang Chong to possess true martial level stellar energy at the essence energy realm. It was just that the amount was not as great. This was the advantage of this technique. Congratulations to user for successfully developing an elementary quality rice. You are rewarded with 50 destiny energy. Just as Wang Chong was silently cultivating, a familiar voice suddenly sounded in his head. At the same time, something seemed to have surged into his head, and Wang Chong immediately felt that something was amiss. Wang Chong exclaimed in surprise. He slowly opened his eyes, and a sharp glint reminiscent of the stars in the night sky flashed across his eyes. What's going on? Isn't 50 destiny energy a little too much? Wang Chong was bewildered. He was originally in the middle of cultivating, and this sudden turn of events was really unexpected. Zhang Munian's side has produced results so quickly. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed across Wang Chong's head. Needless to say, Wang Chong knew that this must be Zhang Munian's doing. Thinking about it, it had only been 4 to 5 months since he arrived at Jiaoji, and yet, he had already managed to develop an elementary quality rice. This was truly inconceivable. One must know that in the other world, this step would have taken 4 to 5 years. Could it be due to the climate of Jiaoji? Wang Chong fell into deep thought. To the people of the Tang dynasty, Jiaoji was far from the royal court, and it was definitely a remote and desolate place. However, there was no better place than Jiaoji for the selection of good crops. There was ample sunlight, and the climate was mild. Crops could be grown 3 times a year. Compared to other places where rice could only be grown once a year, Jiaoji was clearly a paradise. Furthermore, with Wang Chong's guidance, Zhang Munian had indeed avoided many detours. Even so, 4 to 5 months still left Wang Chong surprised. That fellow sure is hard-working. Suddenly understanding something, Wang Chong inwardly sighed. He heard that Zhang Munian had been eating and sleeping outside ever since he arrived at Jiaoji. He didn't return to the residence that was arranged for him at all. The only reason why he was able to produce such results so quickly was due to his hard work. There's no mention of hybrid rice. It only says that it's elementary superior rice, so it's likely that he hasn't succeeded yet. Just that, I wonder how much he managed to raise the yield of the rice. Wang Chong pondered. This world was filled with powerful martial arts, and the top-notch martial artists possessed strength comparable to gods. However, it was a pity that no matter how formidable a martial artist was, he couldn't make a move on a place like rice. Thus, even though the world was prosperous and peaceful, the yield of rice wasn't high. It wasn't at the level of 1,000 caddies per mu, 2 to 3,000 caddies, or even 3 to 4,000 caddies per mu. Without sufficient rations, the population wasn't as large. The entire Tang dynasty only had a population of 50 million or so. It wasn't at the scale of 100 million like in the future. This was also the reason why Wang Chong sought out Zhang Munian to change this situation. Without a large population and rations, it was impossible for them to succeed in the future battlefield. But isn't this reward a little too generous? It's only elementary superior rice, far from hybrid rice. Yet, it's already rewarded with 50 destiny energy. This is truly inconceivable. Compared to Zhang Munian's speed, what shocked Wang Chong the most at this moment was the content of the voice in his head. 50 destiny energy. Wasn't this reward way too generous? Wang Chong clearly remembered that the rewards for changing the fate of his clan and the regional commander's incident weren't this generous. Could it be that Zhang Munian's rice was more important than the regional commander's incident and the survival of the Wang clan? A bizarre expression appeared on Wang Chong's face. There was an indescribable feeling in his heart. He had taken a huge risk in the matter regarding Yao Guangyi and the regional commander's incident, but the reward he received was even less than Zhang Munian's elementary research in Jiaoji. It was truly an indescribable feeling. I understand now. After a moment of contemplation, Wang Chong soon came to a realization. So, it's still because of the influence of the incident, right? The matter at the vast crane pavilion only affected the Wang clan. Compared to the world, it didn't mean much at all. On the other hand, the regional commander's incident had a much greater influence, and it attracted the attention of the royal court. Thus, the reward was slightly greater. If I had completed it perfectly back then, the reward wouldn't have been any lesser than this. As for Zhang Munian's elementary superior rice. Food is the first priority of the people, and this is an incident that will influence the world for generations to come. There's nothing that could be more influential than this. If not for Zhang Munian's recent breakthrough, the reward would have been far more than this. Upon understanding this point, Wang Chong couldn't help but feel delighted. The 50 destiny energy was an unexpected gain. More importantly, Zhang Munian was still far from creating a true hybrid rice. In other words, he would be able to obtain an endless supply of destiny energy from this incident. This was an unexpected gain. Up till now, this was the easiest and largest reward that Wang Chong had received. From the consort Tai Jin incident and the regional commander's incident, Wang Chong had received a total of 50 destiny energy. After deducting the destiny energy from the second world constraint, he was left with 15 points. Not too long ago, he had encircled the Gogurians and killed 3 Gogurian generals. Including King Sojurim, he had received 25 destiny energy. Adding the 50 destiny energy that he had just received, Wang Chong had a total of 90 destiny energy on him. This was not a small amount of wealth. Just thinking about it made Wang Chong feel delighted. With so many destiny energy, I should be able to exchange for that item. Suddenly recalling a matter, Wang Chong quickly communicated with the Stone of Destiny in his mind. Of the 5 destinies, Wang Chong opened the physique, which represented the body. Upon seeing the Destiny Battle Armor option, Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat, and his soul seemed to have left his body. I really want to see what the Destiny Battle Armor looks like. Wang Chong's heart was in turmoil. He really wanted to exchange for the Destiny Battle Armor right now. Steed, weapon, and armor, these were the 3 things that could protect one's life on the battlefield. Wang Chong had everything on him, but he didn't have a suitable armor. The Destiny Battle Armor cost 80 points, and with the amount of points Wang Chong had on him, he could easily exchange for it. However, Wang Chong only thought about it for a moment before dispelling the thought. The 3rd restriction of the world force is coming soon. If I exchange for this battle armor, I won't have enough points at that time. 10 destiny energy isn't enough to clear this trial. By then, I'll really be dead. Wang Chong took in a deep breath. Even though he was reluctant to part with it, he still turned to the last line. Gold organs. This was a new reward from the Stone of Destiny. It would only appear when one had 100 points and above. In his mind, the explanation for the gold organs was: after exchanging for the gold organs, the rate of absorption of world essence chi and recovery of world essence chi had greatly increased. This was exactly what Wang Chong needed right now. With a thought, Wang Chong decisively exchanged for the gold organs. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.